Alrighty, as always, I am always trying to figure out, does this thing work, yes or no? The age-old question, does it work, yes or no? Yes, it does. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. I always have to. For those, Brendan, hi, Brendan. For those of you that don't know, I do not have a second monitor. I'm not cool enough to have a second monitor. So like, whenever I've got to check technical things, I either have to check my phone or I've got to open up multiple tabs, and it's just tabs on tabs on tabs, and it's super annoying. Really terrible. But thank you everyone who's already shown up to today's little thing. I actually need to. I was thinking of like changing my overlay here a little bit because this probably isn't fancy enough. So I'm gonna be working on the fly, as it were. Is this the text? Where's the text? Is that no? What? Oh, I see. I see. Move that up a little. Move that up a little. My hair is all jacked up. How's it going? How's it going, everyone? Everyone. Need to hop into the swing of things here. What was I gonna add? I feel like I was gonna add something like maybe my Discord link on the freaking on the splash screen here. That could probably help out. Like here. Can I add the text here? Select font. Oh gosh. Copperplate Gothic? Light? Sure. Nah, I don't like that. Arial? Arial's the go-to. Arial's the go-to. All right, let me grab the Discord link here as I'm setting it all up. Expire never. Oh god, that came out ugly as sin. Man, that looks terrible. I feel like I should do something a bit fancier than that. And also, what in the... Man, I'm having all sorts of technical issues, aren't I? Man, that looks terrible. Why? Okay, let me put it off on the side there. Yeah, I gotta feel around to see what actually works around here. But yeah, those of you joining in, hello. I am getting bombarded by stuff on Discord. Okay. Yeah, for those of you tuning in, like this is y'all's time. This is my time to talk to y'all's time. This is the time for you all to ask your burning questions about anything and everything. I am here to provide answers for those hard-hitting questions you all have. And if you so choose, you can hop into the Discord, which I will have a link to in the chat. And all you got to do is simply join on in, and you can ask questions in person, or you can type your questions in there in the chat. Entirely up to you. All the meanwhile, I'll be getting some little stuff set up here and there and everywhere. Trying to double up on my time. For those of you curious about what's going on my channel right now, I'm doing a bunch of shorts. Just, some of them comical, some of them goofy, some of them informative, here and there and whatnot. But I'll be making a series of videos on how I plan to rewrite one D&D. That is good. I'm currently like halfway done writing through that, I think. Maybe not halfway done, maybe like a third of the way done. But I'm going to be making a series on improving one D&D. And the idea behind that is I'm going to be making a bunch of videos and slides and whatever else. And it's going to be talking about how to make D&D 1, which is no longer 5e, it's going to be D&D 1, the best D&D that we can possibly have. Because, quite frankly, I think that when it comes to how people run 5e, and how people will plan to run one D&D, I think there's sort of like a mesh between like people aren't using the rules like they are using them. And I'm just having some issues with this green screen, aren't I? What is going on with that? My hair is a mess too. My hair is a terrible mess. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. How do you feel about the way that psychic powers, particularly the two psionic subclasses, were introduced in 5e Tasha's? How does it compare to psionics in previous versions? So yeah, psionics has been a thing that's been around in D&D for quite some time. Not in the beginning of course, but it's been around for a long time. And how it traditionally worked was, when you rolled up a character for a campaign, which one of the bigger campaigns that use psionics would be Dark Sun, you would roll up your character, and then you'd roll, like, in addition to their stats, you would roll up a thing on if they're psionic or not. And ultimately, what ended up happening was, if you didn't roll up psionics, then you were just a normal character. But if you did roll up psionics, you were a better character. And it kind of was just, unbalanced in that regard. And it obviously didn't feel fun if, like, you both rolled up, like, everyone at the table rolled up characters at the same time, and, one person just ends up having a better character because, you could be the fighter, and then, like, you get have two fighters in the party, and one fighter's psionic, one not, and the psionic fighter's usually better, right? So, yeah, so psionics has a weird history, and I know a lot of people didn't like it, and that's kind of why it kind of, petered out through history. And then a little while ago, they were actually planning on making a psionic class. There was a huge UA for it. There was a psionic class, and there was a ton of features that the psionic class gets, and they just did not implement that at all. And so they've taken the very, very short route here of implementing it in feats. And so with the Tasha's psionic feats, they're basically giving you spells. And how I feel about that, it's the boring route, of course. Like, there's the two subclasses that have, like, little psionic little gifts, because there's the psionic fighter, and then there's the psionic, I think, monk, right? And that's the boring route, but it's probably the best route, in all honesty. It's really tough to implement, I don't know how 5e could have done it any other way, because 5e, or in now 1 D&D, is not going to go down the route of having to roll up for a separate stat on the side. They're not going to implement, like, whole feature thing. They may do a psionic class at some point, which I think could be cool, but I don't know if they're going to do it. I've got no idea. Sorry I was late. We just started like 5 minutes ago. You're fine. So yeah, Mike, in total, my overall review of the psionic subclasses and psionic little feats there is, they're serviceable. They do what they need to do. Ultimately, though, like, when it comes to the people that want either, what do you call it stuff? Some people want, the feel, the package, right? And ultimately, if you wanted to play a wizard and you just said, hey, instead of like casting spells, could it be that like I'm using my brain juice for it? I think a lot of DMs would be like, okay, you're a psionic, right? And like you flavor, the fireball shooting out of the wand to now the fireball being I use my third eye and I cause a point to explode. And ultimately, I think that's kind of what I think a lot of people just default to. Hello, friend. Hello, hello. I personally don't think a psi class will happen. They tried and seemed to give up. So the sad and short story about that, Armin, is the person that was heading that was Mike Mearls. And the long story short with that is Mike Mearls did something that wasn't favorable in the eyes of the community, and thus he is no longer basically seen by the community. And because Mike Mearls, he used to do regular streams on the D&D Twitch or YouTube or whatever, and he'd come up with subclasses and classes, and some of the concepts he had were actually pretty fun. Like, in particular, he wanted to bring back the acrobat. It would have been a rogue subclass, but even still. And I think, one of the things he wanted to work on was the psionic, which he put a ton of work in, but ultimately they scrapped the whole thing. And they put a lot of effort into it, too. They put a lot of effort. Like, you can still go back and find that UA subclass, and it's huge. There's a lot going on with it. What did he do that made him unfavorable? So I haven't looked into the specifics, but what I do recall is one of the early playtesters for 5e what turned out to be a bad guy. Like, apparently this dude would be sliding in girls' DMs and threatening them and doing whatever else. And apparently Mike Mearls either accidentally aided in that or didn't stop it. I would need to look at the full details on it, but basically, from what I can gather, Mike Mearls wasn't completely at fault, but at the same time, he could have prevented it, and thus, even though he's not truly guilty, he's still kind of guilty. So they basically to my knowledge, Mike Mearls still works at Wizards of the Coast. It's just that he no longer does any videos. He never does anything public anymore. Adam, do you think that D&D will ever return to its more systematic adventuring formula? Start in a town, go to a dungeon, collect the loot. Or do you think freedom storytelling will be the new focus? Ultimately, I think free-form storytelling will be the new focus for a while. And then what I think is there's going to be a true calling for retro. We can see that right now. There is a huge call for the OSR. A ton of people are hopping into the OSR. And I do think that maybe a lot of people will kind of default to that as well. And that is actually something I'm going to address when I make my videos on making 1E or 1D&D. I will be making a full document basically on reworking 1D&D. And one of the big things I will be addressing in that is the whole systematic adventure of formula, or systematic adventuring formula. How do you actually adventure? What is adventuring for? That is a major thing I'm going to be addressing. Marlene, hi, thank you very much for your comprehensive module guides. I'm actually running TOA right now, and my players are really enjoying it. I'm afraid that my players might get tired of the hex crawl. Very, very common thing there. And I am maybe thinking about doing more of a travel montage, as with most adventures. I'm on the edge of deciding whether this is a wise choice or not. Any advice? Will it kill the magic of TOA? Ultimately, no. Because I think the magic of TOA is, the start of it, is the scary endeavor, right? I'm not going to go into any spoilers for people that have not played into TOA, but the beginning of TOA is the scary endeavor, right? You're a bunch of losers, you're nobodies, you're, fledgling adventurers. And then you get told, hey, you got to go out into the jungle. And guess what's out in the jungle? dinosaurs, zombies, whatever else, and or disease, when you get told these things and you go out and adventure anyway, and you're hacking your way through the adventure, and you're crawling from hex to hex. In the beginning, that's great, but ultimately, 5e is not a game of repeating the same action, right? And very, very more so, 5e is not a game where you're playing the same game forever. Levels 1 through 4, you are weak, you are losers, you are nobodies. But then you hit level 5 and you become somebodies. And I think it's perfectly fine to reflect that in the game mechanics. Like levels 1 through 4, as you're making your way through the jungles of Chult, man, it's scary. We have to worry about every single hex we come across. We have to worry about our food and our water and disease and, random encounters. But then once you hit level 5, then something snaps, right? Something connects. And you are strong, you're powerful. You come across a pack of zombies, boom, fireball them. Oh, there's a T-Rex, the fighter can literally stand up to the T-Rex, And ultimately, I think it's perfectly fine to say, hey, once you reach a certain milestone of your adventuring career, that's perfectly fine. No more hex crawl. Instead of worrying about the minutia of the day-to-day, you have literally overcame those trials, and thus you can move on to the more point crawl aspect of you go from one exciting place to another exciting place. I do not think it removes the what do you call it thing? The magic of Tomb of Annihilation. Just because of how 5e works. Now, if I was running an old school system, then yeah, I would keep the hex crawl up for a long time because, there's a bit more of reason behind keeping a hex crawl in an old school system. But 5e is not an old school system. 5e is very much so a new school system. And it's very much so important to continue on with the process, because once your players hit level 5 and then eventually they go up to the higher levels, then it's a different feel, it's a different tone, it's a different setting. Awesome, thank you, no problem, Adam. Marlene, thank you very much, very good advice, gave me a couple of things to think about. I agree with you 100%. Thank you. Man, it is hot. Where I live, it has been consistently 100 degrees for the past week during the day, which is pretty awesome. I love the heat myself, but a lot of people around me do not appreciate the heat. In fact, a week ago, our AC broke in our house. It was very, very humid in the house, let me tell you. All fixed up now, but Alrighty. For those of you who haven't joined the Discord, join that Discord. You can hop in and ask me a hard-hitting question in voice if you want. You can ask your questions in there in the chat. Perfectly fine, up to you. Have you finished running all the Radiant Citadel quest? Has it changed your opinion of the book at all? I literally just finished the last adventure yesterday. So having ran the Radiant Citadel adventures, I'm here to say that my opinion of the book is a sad mix, because some of the adventures are fine, fun, and fair, and some of the adventures aren't. And also another issue is the first half of the adventures are perfectly easy and simple to run as one-shots. But the later ones, they tack in so much combat that there's no way you could run them as one-shots if you ran them purely as written. No way. Impossible. I just ran the last one, and I checked. And purely as written, the last adventure in the Radiant Citadel, I think has a possibility of 9 encounters. which, for those of you that play 5e, would know that doing 9 combat encounters in a single session is impossible. It's not gonna happen. But overall, I think it's okay. And with that, would you say milestone or XP for PCs? For TOA specifically, I've decided to do XP. I hope I made the right choice. So here's the problem with XP. There's actually a lot of problems with XP for 5e, is what I'll say. So one of the major issues with XP is that you basically are working in a window, right? When you run milestone, you can decide at any point, for any time, for any reason, that they level up, right? Like, this could be invisible to the players don't know when they level up. Or it could be, hey, I'm going to give you guys specific quest, and if you do the X quest, then you get level up. But when you're running XP, you are working in a defined box. And what that means is, whenever you hand out XP, there is no take backsies. And when that happens, sometimes you could potentially give too much XP out, and then there's nothing you can do about it, because you gave out the XP. And you never want to retcon ever. You never want to take away things that the players got, right? So if you give out too much XP, then all of a sudden you might find yourself doing this kind of stop and go motion where you give out a ton of XP and then barely give out any XP. Then give out maybe try to balance it out, but then you give too little, then you give too much, and sometimes that can happen. Now another issue I run into 5e with XP is the fact that you need to really, really decide, how does XP actually work? If XP is for killing monsters, then guess what your game is going to be? Your game is only going to be killing monsters. That is it, right? And ultimately, I don't like 5e just being a monster killing game, because I don't think 5e functions well as a hack and slash monster killing game. I think 5e works as a little bit better in different regards. So you have to decide, okay, what are you going to do XP with? Are you going to give XP for, every hex you uncover? Are you going to give XP for every dungeon you clear? Are you going to give out XP for one gold piece of, treasure retrieved is, 1 XP? What is XP going to actually be? The reason why XP exists in the whole first place in all of tabletop role-playing games, it has a purpose, right? XP was literally there to incentivize you to go out into the dungeon and to retrieve gold, because in the early days in D&D, you got XP for retrieving gold. You barely got any XP for killing monsters, which told the players, hey, instead of fighting monsters, let's get treasure. And that's a very important mentality to have. We are going to do this thing. We don't want to fight monsters because they barely give any treasure or get any XP. And if we fight the monsters, then we could potentially die. So we try and get the gold as much as possible. When you flash forward all the way to 5e, 5e has next to no recommendations for how to handle XP outside of killing monsters. Because it says right there, okay, if you fight 4 goblins, then they give out this much XP. As I just mentioned, the way XP is given is the way players are going to play the game. Do you want your game to be a monster killing adventure? Then XP for killing monsters. Do you want a game where your players are going actively to each dungeon and to each place of interest? And then boom, make XP for exploring and delving into the places of interest. It entirely depends on the type of feel you want to have, and you can really dictate how your players are actually going to explore the jungles of Chult in TOA based off of how you do XP. Wow, go to his Patreon? Thank you, Fireman. For those of you that don't know, I've got a Patreon. I should totally link it. Because I've read a lot of wow, I had a stroke right there. Because I've read a lot on it and Reddit, and gosh, so much controversy. Yeah, I'd imagine so. Oh, I see. I'm trying to find a balance. For instance, when the party was clever rather than just killing, I award them XP. Yes, so that is another thing. Is it doesn't explicitly say it anywhere, but one of the ideas behind having monsters be XP in 5e is that you get XP for overcoming the challenge the monster represents. So, for example, if there is a troll on the bridge, you don't necessarily only get the XP for killing the troll. You could get the XP for getting across the bridge, right? And I know that there's a lot of people that are going to be scoffing at that and being like, oh, what if you try to do it multiple times? Or, oh, what if the challenge isn't actually on par? The perfect example being the giant. If there's a fire giant on a hill and it's throwing rocks from a distance, and the players are not expected to fight this thing because the giant is super far away, and the giant doesn't actually have any, purpose to, chase after the party other than just to throw rocks because it's a dick. If your party overcomes the challenge of getting across a bridge where a giant's throwing rocks, even if it's let's say a level 3 party, should they get the full XP for, overcoming that challenge? I would say no, because the fire giant, the XP would be so ridiculous, it would give, people multiple level ups, right? Which is another part of the problem with 5e is that, trying to basically, you have to measure out, okay, how much XP do I give them for X, Y, and Z? How much XP do they get for, running away from the mimic? How much XP do they get for, clearing out the dungeon? How much XP do they get for clearing this hex? The unfortunate issue is XP just requires a lot more thinking and foresight on you, the DM. Mike, I'm running a campaign in Schuld based on TOA. I give XP for overcoming encounters, however they do it, and also for discoveries and finding secrets because I want to encourage them to explore. Exactly. Exactly, right? So, that's a great way to incentivize your players, right? Because there is a very, very clear difference between incentivizing the players and incentivizing the characters, right? You could say, hey, I'm, in game, you want to explore here because if you do so, in game you will find a magic sword. That's all well and good. Oh, hey, my fighter gets a +1 sword if I clear that dungeon. Cool. But more so, incentivizing the player as well is a great way to get them involved. Hey, if you clear that dungeon, you are going to get XP. Oh, cool. I've got a double incentive, a double reward. This is great. It feels quite arbitrary to decide how much to reward them for exploration, though. Yeah, so that is, once again, ultimately the huge problem of... You can get into these situations where it's okay, how do I dictate how deadly this dungeon is? I'm not going to name any specific dungeons in TOA, but, let's say I go to Dungeon A, and I give my players 1,000 XP for clearing that one. And then we go to the next dungeon, and the next dungeon kicks their butts, because they're, half of them get knocked down, and one person almost dies. How much XP do I get for that? Does it, on paper, they're almost the same, but, they just got unlucky this time. Do I give them more XP? Do I just keep it as is? And also another issue can be, if you are not absolutely on point with presenting the information of, oh yeah, I'm totally on point with rewarding fair and fine XP, then you could get combative players. It entirely depends on your group, of course, but it is possible that you get players that say, hey, we deserve more XP, and then they start chanting, more XP, and that's not something you want. You do not want combative players that demand more, or also very importantly, you don't want players that just automatically take your kindness for granted, right? So there's a lot of things to think about when running an XP system. Now, once again, this is something another reason why we have XP still floating around is from the early editions of D&D. But something very important to consider about the early editions of D&D is that the reason why XP was in the game and not milestone is because the classes leveled up differently. The thief only needed 1200 XP to level up, but the magic user needed 3000 XP to level up. And then the elf needed 4000 XP to level up. So it made sense that there was no milestone because, classes leveled up differently, and thus some classes would just level everyone else. So, that right there was the incentive of like, okay, the thief, can level up twice as fast as the magic user, so like we need to go out and get XP so the thief can be awesome. But in 5e, you don't have that because in 5e, everyone levels up at the same time. So that begs the question of, are we going to have XP be different amongst the players? Like, is player A going to earn, 200 XP for role-playing well? Is player C going to earn XP on the side because they disabled the trap? That's a genuine question you got to ask. On another tangent, opinions on the critical success system for 1D&D. So, as I mentioned before, and I will be mentioning it numerous times until the videos come out, I will be making a whole supplement on 1D&D. And I think my video series that I'm going to be labeling it is Fixing 1D&D One Problem at a Time. Like, that's my current go-to line there. So, critical successes is this weird thing of a natural 1 always fails and a natural 20 always succeeds. So, per 5e right now, that is not the case. Per 5e, that only applies for attack rolls. It doesn't matter if you've got a -5 to your hit. If you roll a natural 20, you can hit someone with a, 25 AC. Like, that's the only way, like, commoners and cats can fight Tiamat, is that if they roll a natural 20, they can hit. And then conversely, it doesn't matter if you've got a +10 to your hit and you're going against an AC, 8 zombie. If you roll a natural 1, you automatically miss. That's all well and good for combat. But the real important thing is the whole critical success system comes in the form of saving throws and ability checks. So, once again, it doesn't matter if you've got a plus. In 5e currently, if you have a -2 to your wisdom saving throw, you cannot succeed on a wisdom saving throw that is a DC of 21. It is impossible for you. Even if you roll a natural 20, you will automatically fail. So you basically just, there's essentially no point in rolling. And then conversely, if like for some dumb reason you're going up against something that, like, okay, it's a DC 5 check, and I've got a +5 to my, strength, let's say. There's once again no point in rolling because even if I rolled a natural 1, I would automatically succeed. So they're doing away with that. They're just straight up saying, hey, natural 1s are always going to fail. Natural 20s are always going to succeed. I do not like that because basically there's a whole bunch of issues with, like, once again, I'm perfectly fine with the attack rolls, the natural 1 always failing, natural 20 always hitting. I'm perfectly fine with that. But what I'm not fine with is specifically the saving throws and the ability checks. The saving throws is pretty much really extremely niche, right? But the ability checks is a big deal because basically it punishes people for being unlucky and serving out a niche, right? Like, let's say I become a bard, that has expertise in athletics. And, like, early on, I've got, like, a +10 to my athletics check. What that means is, like, like, I want to be, like, a grappler, What that means is, ultimately, I'm going to fail a ton of the time because a whole bunch of the times I'm going to roll a natural 1 because I'm, like, doing it so often, right? And that sucks if I've got a +10 to my athletics check and I fail against someone that rolls, like, a 3. Like, that's just bad. I truly think that is not healthy game design. And also is the whole thing of it feels bad when, you know, like there's times where you just shouldn't roll. That caused a lot of stir of like people questioning when does a player roll and when does a player not roll. My simple solution is, if you can accomplish it without a roll, then we're not rolling. If you cannot accomplish it, then you're not going to roll anyway. The only time you're ever going to roll is if it's iffy. You know, if you, as a halfling that is, that is a minus to strength, you are never going to be allowed to, try and grapple the T-Rex. I will not allow it. It is impossible, right? And at the same time, if you tell me, hey, I walk into the room and I check under the bed, I'm not going to make you roll a perception check. That's stupid. You looked under the bed. Okay, you see what's under the bed, right? There's a lot of times in D&D where you do not need to roll. A ton of the time. But for some reason, we're slowly devolving into this game of rolling our math rocks way too often. And I don't like it. Ask anybody that I ran all these one-shots for these past few weeks, and they can agree. Like you tell me, hey, like, I do this, and I'm like, yeah, you can do that, right? Like, it's funny because a lot of players, I get a lot of players that immediately default to trying to roll dice. And I don't want that. Wheeze did the example of the halfling T-Rex grapple. Exactly, right? So, like, the halfling is a minus to strength. The halfling is at best 3 feet tall. According to 1D&D, you're going to be able to roll a natural 20, 5% of the time. The charges to crits have caused so much outcry, I doubt they will keep them. So, yeah, there's two sides of the whole crit thing. There's the whole side of how it affects ability checks, saving throws, and attack rolls. And then the other side of the crit thing is specifically how does it affect attacks? Because that's the other major issue, is the whole thing of how are we dealing with no crits from monsters and no crits from magic. Because if you look at how it's written, purely as written, the DM never gets any crits anymore because no more crits from non-PCs. 2, PCs that have spellcasting attack rolls such as inflict wounds, guiding bolt, firebolt, you name it. None of those crit anymore. And then number 3, when it comes to the marshals that have tacked on dice on the side, such as the rogue sneak attack and the paladin smite, those no longer crit as well. The only thing that crits in 1D&D, the UA 1D&D, the only thing that crits anymore is the weapon dice. Which is, you could consider a huge nerf to everybody else, but you could consider that a buff to the fighter. Loved your TOA series. Helped me a lot. Thank you so much. Just wanted to put that out there. The videos should have much more views. Thank you, Sir Gellington. Thank you. So, what I'm here to tell you, Sir Gellington, is the reason why my guide series don't have many views is because of simple math. Simple as that. So the simple math dictates as follows. We have 40 million people playing D&D. Or 5e, I should say. We got 40 million people playing 5e. Okay? Good. Alrighty, now 1/5 of those are DMs. So then we squanch the numbers down. Okay, 1/5 of 40 million is... Oh god, let's do... I'm actually going to bust out a calculator for this. 1, 2... divided by 5. Okay, so we've got 8 million DMs. Alrighty. So then we do the numbers after that. 8 million DMs out there. Okay. Then how many of them run modules? According to Wizards of the Coast, 50% of DMs run modules. So then we divide that by 2. We've got 4 million. Alrighty, we got 4 million DMs that run modules. Alrighty. Then how many of them run this specific module? That's really hard to math out. Let's just say on the off chance, maybe maybe one in, let's say one in six. Let's go 1 in 6. So then we're left with 666,000 DMs that potentially run TOA. Then, how many of them want to watch a guide? You start lowering it down little by little. You start doing these little things of like, okay, how many people want this? How many people want that? So on and so forth. And eventually you get to this such incredibly small niche number that it just ends up being, very small. We're nearly finished with my players on the second floor of the tomb. One PC dead so far. Ooh. I like it. 8 million DMs. That's pretty cool to think about, actually. That's a decent amount. So you have all the views you can get on planet Earth then. That's the funny thing, right? Is, to my knowledge, I am the only person that's covered as many adventure modules as I have. To my knowledge. I know that there's some DMs out there that cover some of the adventure modules, but not terribly so. Like, one of the major issues, honestly, is the fact that to make an adventure module guide series is an incredible investment. So 1, I have to read the adventure. 2, I'm going to run the adventure. Then 3, when I go to sit down to record the videos, I have to, 1, reread it to ensure that all my data is secure. And then I have to add my, I one kind of like read the vague idea, outline of what's going on, and then also give my own insights. And then I've got to edit the video. And it is a tremendous investment. For example, being Curse of Strahd. Curse of Strahd was freaking 51 videos in that whole playlist. You could, like, I'd have to actually do the math on that one. But doing the Curse of Strahd guide series, it was such a tremendous, thing of doing so many, like, hundreds of hours of work, But please don't let this demotivate you. You do good work. It helped me so much, and I've told my fellow DMs all about this channel. It's a real lifesaver for DMs that have little prep time. And that's exactly why I did it, right? I literally, I thought to myself, I'm going to start off, just doing a review on the module I love so much. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to be the Cliff Notes version of adventure modules. And that's what I wanted to set out to be. I wanted to be the Cliff Notes of adventure modules because, as mentioned before, very few other channels are actually covering all the other things. Now, one of my major issues I've ran into as of recently is not just the time it takes to upload these things, but also my next project. So I'm going to make a video about this fairly soon, discussing this topic of adventure module guides. But so far, I've covered Tomb of Annihilation, Rime of the Frost Maiden, Curse of Strahd, Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, Candlekeep Mysteries, and Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I've covered 6. And the 6 that I've covered, the majority of them have a little bit more free form to them. You know what I'm saying? They have a little bit more, nuance to them. But as the adventures are going on, specifically with the past 3 releases, which are the Radiant Citadel, Stormwreck Isle, and Spelljammer, those 3 adventures in particular have been extremely linear adventures. Extremely linear. I'm talking about you literally you can run it as you are reading it because of how linear it is. Your players show up to a place and you can read out exactly what's going to happen, right? And so I've debated, am I actually going to even make adventure guide modules on the incredibly linear adventures? I don't know. I don't think I need to because of how simple they are. But then that makes me think okay, do I so I don't, if I don't make ones on new ones, then do I go back to the old ones? And then that can be a bit of an issue because, quite frankly, if the difference between an old adventure and a new adventure, I'm willing to bet that old adventures probably get less, viewage. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was thinking of doing a series on Descent into Avernus, but how many people are still looking at that adventure? I was thinking of doing a run-through on Out of the Abyss, but how many people are still planning on running that adventure, right? So I've been running into that kind of issue, and I kind of want to, like, ask my community this. I'll be making maybe a poll about it or videos about it. But I want to genuinely ask, like, is there even any point... One, is there any point to me making adventure modules guides on the new adventures because of how linear they are? And two... is there any actual, like, want for me making adventure module guides on the older adventures? I genuinely don't know. Being a full-time student, this channel has been an absolute lifesaver. Sending love from South Africa. Thank you, thank you. Nice. So yeah, that's my little spiel there of, like, my release content of... I haven't released any adventure module guides recently because, like I said, like, is there any actual want? Is there a need? I don't know. Like, it's sad too because, like, my videos have no chance of being viral, right? Like, I'm not making the top 10 herpy derpy diddly dees. I'm not making this build will ruin your game. I'm not making those videos. Like, the adventure module guides are very slow burn. Like, they get maybe, like, 1 or 2 views each day. Like, at most. But the thing is, over time, that adds up, Like, I'm actually gonna look this up right now, but, let's take a look. Playlist. Let's take a look at what's a good one here. Let's take a look at Waterdeep Dragon Eyes, for example. Oh god, I clicked on it. Actually, Waterdeep Dragon Eyes is doing frickin' hecka good. I'm not gonna lie. Like, a lot of people are watching that recently. That's actually surprising. Like, the very first video in the Waterdeep Dragon Eyes series had 25,000 views, about to hit 26,000. That's actually pretty decent. I'm not gonna lie. I would like to see old adventures covered, but I understand the question. Yeah, that's... once again, I made this channel to help people, first and foremost, right? I made this channel to help people because I wanted to help people because DMing is an incredibly important aspect of this game, and yet the game companies don't care about DMs, and let's face it, a lot of YouTubers don't care about DMs either, right? Because why would they? Why would I make a video that gets 1,000 views talking to DMs when I could get a video that gets 100,000 views doing a funny skit or talking about the build that will, do 500 damage at level 10, right? It's the sad truth of the matter is DMs are such an incredibly important aspect of the game, but because they are the minority of the players, essentially 1/5 of the players, they get shafted quite often. Agreed, the linear modules are okay of a read and prep, but the sandboxy ones and older ones definitely. Yeah, and that goes in line with specifically like big 3 of my adventures that I've covered being Tomb of Annihilation, Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, and Curse of Strahd. Those are very, sandboxy in nature, and there's a lot of things going on with that, a lot of elements, a lot of moving parts. By the way, been running Dragon Heist and using your videos. Thank you, thank you. Also, what is really unfortunate about me is I started off my channel very, very insecure with talking to a camera. And that really sucks. Because, let me tell you, I can speak in public, no problem. I could literally, with no prep at all, go in front of a crowd of X number of people and talk about anything. I am absolutely comfortable with public speaking. However, when I transitioned to talking to a camera, I would be like looking off to the side. I'd say a lot. I would repeat the same words over and over. And that really, really hurt my first few, modules that I covered. Because I kept saying the same things over and over, and I just wasn't comfortable in front of the camera yet. Which really sucks. Like, it made me literally want to go back to redo the Tomb of Annihilation and Waterdeep Dragon Heist series in particular because of how, I did functionally wise, Really sucks. I'm much more confident now. I'm much more able to, talk to a camera. And also, very importantly, is I also know how to edit. In the beginning, I did not know how to edit at all. My edits are terrible. So it is what it is. Videos about the new adventures will still be useful. Some people absorb info from videos easier than reading. New DMs especially need all the help they can get and are more likely to buy the new. So, yeah, Mike, that's another thing, too, is I cannot tell you how many people, either on my comments or specifically mention me or, DM me. I can't tell you how many people I get that are either blind, dyslexic, reading, a verse, XYZ. I get a ton of people who just straight up cannot retain the info that is presented in the books in a proper way. And a ton of people say, hey, your videos help me out a ton. I'm able to envision the area. I'm able to, understand the information at hand. I get a ton of those, and that's freaking great. I'm a big, strong man, I don't cry, but I definitely, choked up a little when I got the first comment ever of someone saying, hey, I'm blind. This straight up helps me better than anything else can. That's cool. My game store DM is also planning on running Dragon Heist. I think it's becoming increasingly popular. Yeah, I certainly hope so. I would certainly hope so. Videos that help people deal with adventures like Out of the Abyss are sorely needed by the DM that do want to run those adventures. The small number of viewers would be very grateful. Yeah, that's ultimately the thing is, my viewers are typically grateful. And also that's another part of the problem with my channel. So when for those of you that want a little backdrop on how YouTube works, YouTube wants your viewers to continually view your content. Now, if I were to make power build videos, how to do X at level 5, how to make the best warlock, how to make the best you typically get a retention of the same viewers. If I make a top 10 herpy derpy diddly d, I'm typically going to have the retention of the same viewers. Now, that does not apply to adventure modules, because guess what? If you are running Curse of Strahd, there's a very solid chance that you are not running another module at the same time. And thus, even though you watch some of my content, you don't watch all of my content. And what happens is, YouTube recognizes that I've got 10k subs, but I'm not getting 10k views. And why is that? That is because my viewer base is extremely fractured. My viewer base is split all over the place. Some people only watch me for Curse of Strahd. Some people only watch me for Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Some people only watch me for Out of the Abyss, or Tomb of Annihilation, and etc., etc. And thus, YouTube punishes me. YouTube doesn't push out my content as much as someone else who has the retention of the same viewers. So, that, a little backdrop there, that is unfortunately why my channel isn't as big as it potentially could be, is because I fractured the viewer base. You are always your worst critic. Absolutely. I really enjoyed the videos, and I found them comprehensive and to the point. Do you stream your D&D games? Would love to see how you DM. So, one, I run a bunch of one-shots. So, if you join my Discord, then you can absolutely join in on the one-shots that I run. But two, I am actually planning on streaming some of my games. And my thought process behind streaming these games is I'm going to stream the game, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit the video and release it. And when I edit the video, I'm going to add DM notes, like basically like a DM commentary. So, when I'm running the game, I'm very preoccupied with, running things and checking on the notes and X, Y, and Z. So I'm not really going to be too focused on the chat, unfortunately. Not unless there's like some sort of dull, moment, which I would hope there isn't when I'm running a game. But basically, my idea is these DM notes are going to be basically my thought process of what was going on at that time. So while I'm saying, hey, player, roll a wisdom saving throw. And then I'll be like, like in the DM commentary, which will be like text, it'll be like, oh, hey, here's why I'm doing this. It's because I'm getting them set up for this, message. Or, oh, hey, players, as you walk into the room, you see that in the corner. And then my DM notes will be like, the reason why I'm describing it in this way is to give them the imagery, or it's to maybe possibly be a red herring, or, da-da-da, so on, so on. So I want to do that because, obviously, when people are DMing, they're too busy DMing to explain why they're doing what they're doing, Oh, that'd be a great idea. I love the DM notes thing. Yeah, I think that it could be really cool. Hello, Loianda. So, yeah, DMs are busy DMing, so they can't explain why they're doing what they're doing. So, I think the DM notes thing could be a really fun idea on both streaming some games, running games for people, and also getting people, the backdrop of what is actually going on behind the scenes. Great idea, thank you. So I've got a lot of ideas about the kind of games that I'm gonna be streaming and whatnot. Holy crap! I guess I haven't checked this in a while. You got hair? Funnily enough, I typically have hair. It's just that when I started the channel, it was during Corona, like super heavy times, and I couldn't go out to get a haircut, so I would typically just buzz my hair. The Corona cut, as it were. I get the gay voice. Is that all you think of me, Loriander? Is that all you think of me? But yeah, so I typically I have hair. Typically most humans have hair. But no, it's funny. It's such a funny way of putting it. It's just the nature of, on my channel, in the beginning, I shaved I buzz cut my head a lot. And then I also wore a beanie for a lot of videos too. So, me growing out my hair for the first time in a long time, it looks weird for a lot of people, I guess. He lost all of his hair during Frontier. Good to see it's back. For those of you that aren't in the know, the Frontier is a game I ran, which was a West Marches game. And this was just me as the DM with 30 players. And the reason why I might have been pulling my hair out during the Frontier is because managing 30 players, especially when some of them are troublesome players, is quite a lot to deal with. Humans are well known for having hair and getting inspiration every morning. Inspiration, that's another thing I'm going to talk about when I do my whole making my own version of 1D&D. For those of you just tuning in, I'm going to be planning on making my own version of 1D&D. And, ultimately, I think that my version of 1D&D is going to be better than 1D&D. I'm going to explain it, during my set of videos and my whole, thing that I'm going to be making on it. But yeah, I think my version of 1D&D is going to be cool. You can also say, thank you, I grew it myself, Flips hair. I'm actually curious about that. If I actually, styled my hair, put some gel in it, maybe I could, make it look good. We need to find time at some point. Yeah. So Loriander, I've been hectic busy this week for sure. But now that I've ran through my Radiant Citadel adventures, I think I should be cleared up for a little bit. For 10 fabulous 10 out of 10. Thank you. I do need to style my hair to some degree. So yeah, Loriander, I'll absolutely get with you at some point. Like I said, super busy, super busy. Hey, most people think their house rules are better. More power to you. True. But the difference being, Tristan, is that I've got authority because I make videos on the internet. Never, ever respect anybody's authority just because they make videos on the internet. But ultimately, what I will say is my version of 1D&D is going to basically address a lot of the core functionality of what we have of 5e, and is going to make it a better version of the game that people are trying to run. Would it really be a no fun stream if I did not donate $1.99? You don't have to donate to me. All donations are absolutely appreciated, of course, but you do not have to donate. Oh, and the name 1D&D, I was kind of like, yeah. So another issue too is 1D&D is a terrible name. Let's face it, everybody. Everybody hates the 1D&D name. It's terrible, and it's funny too because when you shorten it down to OD&D, guess what? OD&D in the community stands for Original D&D, which, I mean, come on now. Farrah Fawcett, Prince Charming hair flips abound. Absolutely. I'd love to get the Prince Charming thing of having the hair split down the middle thing. That'd be fabulous. Because they're basically saying we have the best version of D&D. Ice cream, fireman. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any and every little bit helps. For those of you that don't know, I am poor. For those of you not in the know, to give you some insight on here, I'm going to peel back the literal curtain. So, this is not even a green screen. This is a green bedsheet. This is a literal green bedsheet that I hang from the ceiling. And I'm not sitting in a cool gamer chair. I'm sitting on the floor in front of my couch because of my gaming setup. There we go. A little peel back behind the curtain there. Actually, that's actually really cool. I'm reading this. I'm reading some Dungeon Crawl Classics adventures, and whoa, that looks dope. The cover is green for this, so it's like coming in all gnarly. That looks really cool. It looks like it's about to be like a mirror. That's dope. I wonder if I can do something with that. Oh, that looks baller. But regardless, thank you so much, Fireman. Thank you. The name is the worst thing. LOL. DCC, yes, Dungeon Crawl Classics. Tristan, I run a bunch of Dungeon Crawl Classics. I run a bunch of it. I absolutely love it. Oh, goodness gracious. The rest of the game designers, all the years, their blood, sweat, and tears, wizards now. Yo, sorry, fam, we are the best. It's just the thing of D&D is trying to, Wizards of the Coast is trying to cement their lead on the competition. Which I completely understand why they're doing it. It's not cool that they're doing it, but I understand why they're doing it. Exploration turns inspiration. Take it. So yeah. Once again, I'm absolutely going to have a whole pillar on exploration when it comes to 1D&D or my version of 1D&D because, let's face it, 5e has next to no rules on exploration. Did you finish the firefighter education? Unfortunately, no, Lorander. Unfortunately, no. Turns out that my body was a little bit maybe not up for the task. Turns out. Hey there, No Fun. How's it going, Juan? Go to his Patreon. Money. Yes. I believe I've got a link to my Patreon in the video or in this, I think. Now that so normally I post on Patreon, but I haven't been posting on Patreon lately. And unfortunately, yeah, because I've been so incredibly busy. but yeah, I what do you call it? I've been incredibly busy, but yeah, I'll be returning to posting on my Patreon. I'll be posting up maps and art and magazines full of goodies. I'll be doing all that fun jazz. Traps Call Initiative. What firefighter? That's so cool. Yeah, so Marlene, I originally was going to school to become a firefighter, and I was nearly there to the end, but some life got in the way, and my body may not be up for it. I got a like somewhat busted leg. Sometimes my leg is in so much pain that I can't do what I need to do, but you know, I tried my best. Trying to ditch the edition number from the game seems short-sighted to me. There will be more rules changes eventually, and people will need names to distinguish the different rule sets. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's all good, Lander. You know, at least I get to be on YouTube. If I was a firefighter, I could promise you that I wouldn't be able to do as much D&D content because being a firefighter is kind of a big job. I'm running 3 campaigns at the moment. One of them runs weekly and it's great. And the other 2, we only meet about once a month. And even though they like it, I struggle to stay motivated with long story adventures. Yeah. Dillionaire coming in with the $1.99. Dillionaire, thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Any and every little bit helps. You do not have to donate, but every tiny little piece helps. It goes a long way. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Should astral monks be allowed to attack if they are restrained? Huh. I'd say that depends on the restraining. If it's like if it's restrained like magically restrained, like they're being held, then yeah. They can't attack. But if it's a restraint, like they've got like just a rope around their fist or like around their hands, and their hands are just placed forward and they can move their arms around, then yeah, they can attack, sure. Nice, I'm sorry, no fun? No, it's all good, it's all good. It's funny because I've got my career path has been really weird, is what I'll say. My career path in life has been really strange. And, because, like, right now, you could consider me a part-time YouTuber because I am technically making money off of YouTube. You just saw I made $2 off of YouTube, so I'm technically a part-timer YouTuber. But on the side, I'm also a freelance writer. I write for, I'm writing my own adventures, and I'm writing, either scripts or adventures for other content creators, so is what it is. Don't sweat it. We all got issues. I'm a type 1 diabetic. Can't do anything for too long without blood sugar drops or stress driving it sky high. Just keep your head up. Absolutely. The situation was gobbled up by a giant toad. Oh, good old giant toads. Good old, bean toads. We want to thank you for all the games you ran this summer. They were a blast, especially the Peasants to Hero games. Absolutely. I am going to continue to run more games. I am absolutely going to continue to run more games. So, that, like, the Summer of No Fun is still going. It might turn into the Fall of No Fun. Actually, man, the Fall of No Fun sounds really bad. maybe I won't call it the Fall of No Fun. Maybe I'll call it the Autumn of No Fun. Maybe I'll just have it the extended Winter of No Fun games. Who knows? But yeah, I'll absolutely continue to run games. I'll do a better job of actually posting about it. And like I said, I'll actually be streaming some games. So maybe streaming the games will actually incentivize some people to hop in. Because my YouTube contemporary, Mr. Steely Sam, that guy streams 3 games a week, and all the time people are always asking, "Hey, do you do more games? Do you run any games?" And screw that, I want to run some games for people. Screw that Steely Sam guy. Fall of No Fun, The Rise of Chaos. No fall allowed. No fun autumn. See, there you go. I've got some good names already. Thank you all. Got some good names going on there. The year of no fun, but there was. You know, the whole naming scheme of No Fun Allowed, like, it started off as a joke. You know, because it was literally an inside joke with all my friends of them calling me No Fun because I didn't allow some outrageous thing in a game one time. And sadly, a lot of people just do not understand that it's a joke. Recently, Steely Sam made a video about me, and it got 200,000 views. Like, it got a ton of views, and in fact, from him, I got a bunch of subs. And a bunch of people in the comment section were like, "Oh, this guy, like, prides himself on being a loser. Oh, this guy, this guy is just a total, like, scumbag DM." And, it's really funny because, like, obviously anyone that actually plays with me knows that I am absolutely, down for a lot more. Oh my gosh. Loriander with 100 DKK. Here is little to help you. Small apology for all the trouble my character did to you. I know you wanted to kill him so much. Absolutely not, Loriander. I never wanted to kill you. Never, ever. Thank you, Loriander. Thank you so much. I'll tell you what, Loriander, of all the people in that campaign, you are far from anyone that I wanted to kill. Far from. But thank you so much. Thank you. Just watched you guys side rail his last stream for 20 minutes. Ha, definitely entertaining, though. Thank you. Oh, goodness gracious. He was the tank of the frontier. Wait to outdo me. Yep, your character absolutely was the tank. And not only that, but for transparency here, for those of you not in the know, when I ran this frontier game, it was me as the DM and me the only DM. 30 some odd players, and over the course of 82 sessions, there were 79 dead PCs. It was a very high turnover rate. Now, you might immediately say that I sound like a cruel and vindictive and horrible DM, but guess what? The players didn't think that. The players, for the most part, maybe one or two of them had some choice words, but for the most part, they truly, like, whenever any PC died, they would be like, "Oh yeah, I understand." Like, "Oh yeah, they died because, I rolled good, or they rolled bad, or they did something they shouldn't have." And it was truly a great sensation to run that killy of a game, with over the course of 82 sessions, 79 dead PCs, nearly 1-for-1, right? Nearly. The fact of the matter was, and mind you, that's 82 sessions with 30 some odd players, just me as the DM. And I did that in the span of like 6 months. Like, in the span of 6 months, I ran a ton of games, right? That was a really great learning experience for me as a DM. I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of things about how to run a game. I learned a lot of things about the social dichotomy of having 30 players in the same game. I learned a lot of things about balance. I learned a lot of things about, each individual player showing up. I learned a lot. And ultimately, I gained a great amount of experience, which I am carrying over to future games. Because when I run my next series of West Marches games, which that's what that was. That was a West Marches game. You know, that's gonna be the best West Marches game ever. So for those of you that don't know exactly what a West Marches game is, I'm actually going to be releasing a video on it tomorrow. But ultimately, the idea of a West Marches game is, me as the DM, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to run a game on Thursday at 3 o'clock. Who wants to play? And then whoever in the community wants to show up and play gets to play. You play your one session, and then by the end of it, you return home. And that's the session done. And then next up, I say, hey, I'm going to run a game on, Saturday at, maybe 8 o'clock in the morning. Who wants to play? And then random people show up and play. But the important thing about this game is that it's a shared world. Even though we are playing with a bunch of different players, we're playing in the same shared world, and you are all furthering, objectives. Maybe your objectives are to just earn more gold. Maybe they're to explore the wilderness. Maybe they're to clear a dungeon. Maybe they're to, kill a certain bad guy. XYZ, da-da-da. But ultimately, the West Marches game is truly the MMO experience because, it doesn't matter when your availability is. If I run games all the time, you can hop in on a game and join in on the fun. And that's what it's all about. I did not lose a single character. Thoric was with them from the first to the last. Absolutely. We learned not to put Tony and Boba together. I definitely learned that. I'm down. Heck yeah. I'll be making more posts about it in the future. I'll be, getting all the gears working and all that. But when I go to run my next West Marches game, I'm absolutely going to go all out, and it's going to be a blast. It's going to be a big old community event. I'm hoping to get a bunch of people playing. I'm hoping to make a bunch of videos about it, about the players exploring this world. Where can I sign up? This seems like what No Man's Sky was supposed to be. Yeah, like I said, Spy. One, I'll have a link to my Discord if you haven't already joined. But two, I'll be making things about it in the Discord, on the YouTube. I'll be making a bunch of things about it. Basically, my idea for the next West Marches game that I do is it's going to be basically a bit like Frontier. Lorinder, it's going to be like Frontier, except a bit more structured from the get-go. It's going to be a bit more structured, and what it's going to be really cool about this is when you join this game, you create your character in my version of character creation method, which I'll have posted by the time that it comes out. And then you join a guild. And depending on the guild that you join, you get certain benefits. And as you go out and adventure, you basically get more benefits for your guild. And so when you show up for a game, you could be with some of your guild members, or maybe you're with some other guild members, but that's fine because all the guilds are working together. And you go out to adventure, you explore the wilderness, you delve into the dungeons, you do whatever, and then you return home, and then you rack up your reward. You get your XPs, and then you get your golds, and you further your guild XP, and you did this and that. And it's going to be this big old collaborative effort of, furthering the world and furthering your guild and furthering the individual characters. So it's going to have a lot of cool moving parts to it. Is it going to be as punishing as the Frontier? That I haven't truly determined yet. I don't know if it's going to be a... Can't be Warlock, please. That I haven't determined. I haven't determined what game system I'm going to be using. I haven't determined if it's going to be a high-lethality game or not. I haven't determined, anything in regards of the actual, game mechanics of what system it's going to be or whatever. Warlock was not allowed in Frontier? It was. Warlock was allowed. We had a few Warlocks. It's just a matter of the Warlocks kept on dying was the problem. Those Warlocks kept getting blasted every time. we had a few warlocks. So yeah, if you're, I'll definitely be making more strides into making the West Marches game, the no fun West Marches game. And I'll be looking into all that. Think about Undead Summoner. Yeah, so there was no there were certain like classes and certain spells I didn't allow, right? So Necromancer. Yeah, there's no Necromancer. So for the Frontier in particular, how that game worked, was this based in 5e? Yes, this was based in 5e, the Frontier. Necromancer, yeah. So the Frontier was based in 5e, except for a few alterations. One, there were certain spells that, I just straight up disallowed. There were straight up some, archetypes I disallowed. And also, one of the biggest changes, and this is the reason why there was a high lethality rate, was because there was no long rest during the session. None at all, right? So you go into the dungeon, and guess what? You take some boo-boos, well, suck it up, no long rest. And that right there, basically, it pushed a lot of people into being like, oh man, like, so-and-so just got jacked up. What are we going to do? Are we going to, like, continue venturing on? Are we going to, like, ditch this dungeon? What are we going to do? Spores Druid. I can't remember if Spores Druid was in the game at that point or not. I can't remember. Actually, you know what? I feel like there was a Spores Druid because I remember killing a Spores Druid. I remember a dragon killing a Spores Druid. Always wanted to run a West Marches campaign. Healers was so important. Yeah, so that was a big thing, is because there was no long rest during a session. The spell slots that you started with during that session, like, that's it, right? Like you casted spells, they're gone for the rest of the session. So it was kind of a big deal. It was a very big undertaking. But once again, no long rest 5e players must have been shocked. I think we had some good we had some good sports about it, right? Because ultimately I killed 79 PCs. And they kept coming back, right? Like, these players, like 30 in total, the majority of them kept coming back for more. Even if their PCs died, they would just roll up a new one. So, they were good sports about it. Once again, when I do run my next West Marches, I genuinely don't know if I'm going to be using 5e or if I'm going to be using 1D&D or my own version of 1D&D or, heck, some other game system. Like, I don't know, like, running a West Marches game using old school essentials would actually be incredibly simple for me, and actually would make my life a lot easier. Because 5e ultimately, at this point, running a West Marches with 5e would be a little bit tough because of how, like, all the moving parts and how slow combat is. I'll have to really, like, actually, like, dedicate some time to thinking about, like, how I'm going to handle all that. I've never played West Marches style. Would you make use of downtime mechanics? Yeah, so the last time I didn't, purely because, one, I was new to it, and two, I also had a lot of players, and like it's a little bit overwhelming. But next time, there will be downtime activities. Absolutely. So the idea is, you go, like, first off, this is not going, the West Marches game is not going to be, like, sadly, it's not going to be about the individual, right? It's not going to be about, hey, player, you've got an epic, incredibly in-depth backstory, and your uncle's the bad guy, and the bad guy, has a curse against your whole family. Sadly, it cannot be that personal because I can't run a personal game for 30 plus people, right? Just not going to happen. So the incentive for the game is absolutely going to be to get gold for personal, wealth and whatever whatever you want to, implement into the game. And so to facilitate that, the downtime activities will absolutely be dependent on what sort of gear you acquire and what gold you get, on your adventures. Do it. So you're saying we should play Healer Feat, Spore Druid, Source, Halfling, Orc. Another important thing, too, I totally forgot about this. It was not, for stats, it was not 46, drop the highest, or drop the lowest. It was not point buy, it was not stat array. It was 3d6 flat. And for those of you that haven't played this before, 3d6 flat for 5e characters makes everyone really bad. When everyone rolls 3d6 flat for their stats, nobody's getting anything good. And ultimately, that was a really cool part about the Frontier was it was a bunch of losers going out into the dungeon. And, when you've got a bunch of people who their highest stat is like a 13, and you make something and you accomplish something, that's way better than if you create a god tier character. And that was another really cool part was there really wasn't like people making these power builds because you couldn't with the stats, right? The majority of the time people couldn't even multi-class because their stats were so bad. And the few times that people did roll high, people wanted to protect them like they're the demigods. And in fact, sadly enough, the very first person who ever rolled an 18, they rolled an 18 in their strength. And everyone was like, oh man, this is going to be the legend. This is going to be the hero. He died 2 combats in. He got trampled by a Triceratops. Because they thought he was going to be the god, the demigod. They thought he was going to be the Hercules. He got trampled by a Triceratops. A good death can be quality and tribute to the character, especially if it's especially stupid. Absolutely. I had a dwarf life cleric in plate armor. OP. God, nice. What is more time consuming for you, running a West Marches campaign or a printed campaign? Ooh, that's actually interesting. So the funny thing is, Juan, when I go to run a West Marches game, I do a lot of the prep ahead of time. Like, I do the overwhelming majority of the prep ahead of time. When I run a West Marches game, I've already got the wilderness already mapped out. I already have the dungeon mapped out. I've got the factions already written out. So basically, there is very little prep time when running West Marches game because I don't have to worry about implementing individual players' backstory. Right? People just show up to adventure. That's the reason why you're here. So actually, funnily enough, even running a game for air quote 30 players, running a printed campaign for 4 players actually is more time because with those 4 players, I'm going to be a bit more intimate with them. I'm going to be a bit more seeding them into the story and making it work. Versus when I run the West Marches game, I'm just going to have an adventure site and whatever reason you show up to adventure, that's on you. But you are showing up to adventure. End of story. So it's kind of funny how that works. In my Beckman campaign, I was rolling new characters, 3d6 down the line. The first character I rolled died in character creation because he had 3 con. So the funny thing is what so back in the day, 3d6 down the line was a very common thing, but it doesn't work as well for 5e because in 5e, of course, as you very well know, the stats aren't the same. In Beckme, 9 to 12 is a 0, or 9 to 11 is it 9 to 11 or 9 to 12 is a 0, and then so on and so forth is a +1 and +2. So with 3d6, on average, you're getting a 0. But the problem is, with 3d6 and 5e, you're getting on average, a -1 modifier. Which is really funny. And, in fact, actually, because of the whole 3d6 stats, and people having incredibly bad stats, that led to some, fantastic things. One of which was the most memorable PC in the game was a PC named Dopey. Dopey rolled anywhere between 3 to 8. their highest stat was an 8. And Dopey, Dopey had a 3 intelligence, a 3 constitution, just terrible, terrible stats. So by that time, Dopey was a 3rd level character with 5 HP because he was a wizard. So Dopey the wizard had 5 HP because because of how this you get the health plus or minus your modifier, and then you get a +1, plus whatever. So Dopey would only ever get a +1 HP every time they leveled up. And Dopey, in Dopey's lifetime, only ever rolled 3 dice in the campaign. They rolled an athletics check to hop to a rock. They rolled initiative. And then they rolled a dexterity saving throw against the dragon's breath. Those were the 3 rolls that Dopey ever made. First plus modifier was on odd. Yes, I believe so. Because Tristan, if you're not familiar with old school D&D, it didn't reach up to +5 or -4 essentially. So what it was 9 to 12 was 0. And then 13 to 15 was +1, 16 to 17 was +2, and then the coveted 18 was a +3. Funny thing is, the DM tells us to roll 46 to draw the lowest, but we have all refused and insist on 3d6. I even rolled randomly for what spell I had. So, I personally love 3d6 down the line. And the reason why I love 3d6 down the line is you do not show up to the game with personal baggage. When I know a lot of modern gamers, when they show up to a new table, they say, oh, I've got this character idea I want to run. I wanted to run this thing, and I want to run that, and, oh, I'm going to take this. But when you roll 3d6 down the line, you are forced to work with what you got. Like, if you're the player that says, oh, I wanted to be a warlock who's got this feature, but your charisma is like a 6, then guess what? You're probably not going to want to be a warlock, right? And so, like, the 3d6 down the line really does dictate, okay, I rolled high in a strength and a con, so maybe I'll be a fighter, or maybe I'll be a barbarian, or, it gets you thinking outside of your comfort zone, which I really appreciate. What were the rules for rolling new characters? What level would they start? So in my Frontier game, how it worked was, in the beginning, everyone was level 1. Everyone had 0 XP. And then how it worked was, the collective group, as they ventured out, they would make, as you explored and as you bought certain things in town, the XP threshold would go up. So basically how that worked was, as they explored more, eventually the XP threshold got higher and higher. So in the beginning, everyone starts off at level 1. Any PC dies, guess what? You start off at, as a level 0, level 1 nobody. And eventually, the XP threshold would get higher and higher. As, I believe what it was you get 100 XP for every hex uncovered, because it was a big old hex crawl and, like, they're exploring around. And then I think it was plus 1,000 XP for every dungeon cleared. So in the beginning, there was a high turnover rate because, they're all low-level losers. They're all getting themselves killed. And then they all keep on coming back. But then, as they cleared more hexes and as they cleared more dungeons, naturally the new bloods, the new PCs coming in, would be a little bit higher and higher. Now, what happened overall was eventually there would be some people that slipped through the cracks. In the beginning there was a high turnover rate, like literally everybody was dying, everybody was constantly getting flushed out. But then eventually some of the PCs got higher level than everyone else. And because they were so high level, it was a lot harder for them to die. And it was also very easy for the other PCs to die. So what ended up happening was a few PCs were surviving and getting more XP, and then a bunch of turnover rate at the bottom, which really led to a problem of some of the players were just, basically being the powered, people at the top, and then the other players were just rotating out these crappy characters again and again. Eventually by the end, it leveled out somewhat, but because of how 5e XP works, which I will discuss later on, 5e XP is terrible. But yeah, eventually, people, I think by the end, PCs were, I think, level 5 when they would create a new one. Raw mold character dies, new character's level 1. Ugh. 3d6 roll a level 0. I guess you could do that now with 1. You have a background, lol. Yeah, so once again, when I go to create my fixing 1 D&D thing, where I'm going to create my own new version of 1 D&D, I will be discussing things such as how does level progression work and all that, because it's very important to discuss. Very important. .5e XP, yeah, almost unusable. It, once again, XP is it's so strange. I don't know how long they ran the math on that, but there is actual charts, and basically what the charts show is, I think it's at at some point you've got to get into 20 encounters before you level up, and it takes a long time to level up, per 5e. I actually need to find this chart again. But there's some levels where it's okay, you need to get into 5 encounters to level up, and then 10, and then eventually, for a bunch of levels, you got to get into 20 some odd encounters to level up. It's a lot. What kind of guild rewards did you have? So in the Frontier in particular, as their guild basically leveled up, new characters would get bonuses, existing characters would get bonuses. They'd get new features, and they would, and they'd get faction renown and things of that nature. There was a lot of little things going on. But when I run my new one, my new Frontier, which is going to be called Guilds and Gargoyles, I think is my working title for it. Right from the get-go, guilds are going to be, each guild is going to have a bonus, which incentivizes you to choose a certain guild based on your character. 5e really leans heavily to using milestone, which is really funny because, if you actually read the original player's handbook, that is not the case. They didn't even though the mechanics dictate that milestone is way better, they did not have XP in mind, or they didn't have milestone in mind. They had XP in mind. Per example, being is actually in the adventure modules as well. If you actually read the original XP or original adventure modules, such as Rise of Tiamat, Horde of the Dragon Queen, Curse of Strahd, basically in those adventures, there's a bunch of things that are if your players do this, they get 1500 XP or whatever, which is really weird because all of us, now that we've got years in the making of 5e, we understand that 5e just isn't that great for XP. Bottom right corner of 5e, PHP page 15. Especially if GP isn't a factor in XP, it must be tough. Every 5e campaign I'm in, DM uses milestones. Yeah, and I think milestone's perfectly fine. I think that milestone, just works incredibly simple, well, it's elegant, and you don't have to worry about, crunching numbers. But that being said, when I run my West Marches just natively has to be XP. How I'm going to handle that XP, that may be different. A simple solution actually would be, instead of XP being, XP for killing monsters or XP for gold, one way my XP could work is you get 1 XP for attending a session, and maybe you get 1 XP for like clearing a dungeon or fulfilling X milestone in game. That could be a simple way, right? Like you just simply just get XP for showing up and lasting the session. Last comment was for the character progression chart. Yeah. So if you look at like, yeah, that character progression chart of XP is just it's wacky. It makes no sense. Doing the actual math of how they planned XP to be given out and how many encounters you got to do and all that fun jazz, it's just so much. I like my first take on that 5e chart was that it leveled too quickly. Yeah, let me see if I can. I really want to find it because there's definitely a really good like analysis. 5e XP by level expected encounters. I've seen this chart somewhere. I really want to find it again. Where the frick is it? Like it's a really cool graph too. It's like it's not just like numbers. It's an actual like graph that shows it. Oh man, it's gonna take me forever to find that one thing that I want, huh? Yep, obviously West Marches is a different beast. XP is needed. Yeah, but mind you, XP doesn't have to be as the dirty thing of you get 20 XP for killing a goblin. I could make it that simple thing of 1 XP for showing up, 1 XP for clearing X thing or completing X quest. Simple as that. Or if I am using an old school system, it could be XP for gold, like achieved. I think that could be a pretty simple way as well. You look like someone that would beat up needs. You look like someone that would beat up needs that played RPG. I assume nerds beat up nerds that played RPG in school. What made you join them instead? So I didn't play RPGs in school. I didn't get to play RPGs until I was like. God dang, I didn't get to play tabletop role-playing games until I was like 22, 23 maybe. I mean, mind you, I didn't beat up the nerds either. It's funny, I think some people may like look at me and just automatically assume I'm more of like the jock type because I do have a bit more of an athletic build and maybe just the way I speak in my vernacular maybe. But yeah, I just never got the chance to play tabletop role-playing games when I was a kid. I didn't get to play board games when I was a kid. It wasn't until I was an adult that I was able to be lucky enough to join a community that had people to play D&D with. Old man. I am old, unfortunately. I am old. I feel it. I feel it in me bones. I'm old, Gandalf. I may not look it. Where is that frickin' chart? I want to find it. Like, there's just, like, I'm like envisioning this in my head. Maybe this is it? No, this is, like, I remember seeing a much more elegant chart. I'm going to post it in my D&D, or my general chat in my Discord. But, yeah, at some point you need to get into a ton of encounters per like thing. I remember it being I remember seeing a chart that was a little bit different than that, but regardless. I started out with the RP books you read. You picked a choice that moved to that page. That was my first RP experience. Good old choose your own adventures. So choose your own adventures are absolutely, I imagine, a great gateway into RPGs, right? Yeah, it's odd. As kids, people didn't want to play board games, but as we get older, people get interested. Damn mobile autocorrection. I mean, I'll tell you what, I wanted to play board games and tabletop role-playing games. It's just no one in my friend group or in my little society had the, want or desire. I was just unlucky. I played back in the day. I'm ancient then. Cleaning out my dad's house, found all my old D&D stuff, and resisted selling it for nostalgia. Didn't realize D&D had come back. Never thought I'd be playing again. Heck yeah. Heck yeah. D&D, obviously, like, it had its ups and it's had its downs, but right now, 5e or D&D has never been bigger. You know what I'm saying? West Marches conceptually is the way AD&D was run, campaign-focused rather than module character-focused. True, but the real, I think, difference there is you could, run AD&D, with the individual focus, right? Like, there's plenty of stories of people doing that. And like, famously, back in the day, it was perfectly common for people to take their character sheet to another table, which is such a strange concept. Like, you're playing at Bob's table, and then all of a sudden you hop over to Sally's table, like, with that character that's got all their gold and all their XP and all their magical items. Like, that's such a strange concept to the modern gamer, because I would never allow that, right? Like, you play in someone else's campaign, you can't freaking bring your character over to mine with all your swag. Screw that. But that's how a lot of people ran the game back then. That's actually seen in what do you call that? In Stranger Things. Like, you see a character, someone says, "Hey, I brought my character." Like, "Hey, let's play," And yeah, so West March is I think, sadly, like a lost art. There is some people that still play to this day. I know that there is some big West Marches groups, but I think that West Marches is an absolute fantastic way to play the game, purely because it is a fantastic way to get people to play that normally cannot play. Like, I know a ton of people that I cannot run a campaign for because they have inconsistent schedules. Maybe this week they work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but then the next week they work, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? And it's really unfortunate that a lot of people have inconsistent schedules. But running a West Marches game where you show up to play a one-shot and you do your thing, and by the end of the session you return home, that's a fantastic way to get people to play that normally can't play. Absolutely great. Back in the day, finding people to play was the problem. Now it's finding time slots that don't conflict with all the games being played. Absolutely. True, I rejected player characters. Absolutely. This what you were looking for? Let me take a look. Maybe. Maybe. Oh, that's really funny. So, going further into that link you just sent there, Mike Mearls, the guy that got canceled from Wizards of the Coast, he tweeted out at some point, level 10 through 11 XP, it's by design. Data shows campaigns stop at 10. We're trying to speed up 10 plus a bit so groups can reach 20 in a campaign. That is really interesting. So right from the get-go, they knew that people didn't play past the 10th level. So they instead decided to say, hey, like, let's make leveling up through levels 1 through 10 quick, so that people move on to the higher levels. That is another thing I'm going to be addressing with my rendition of 1D&D. I will be addressing the whole idea of people not playing past 10th level, because it is a very common occurrence. Many people do not play past 10th level. They sell D&D stuff at Target and Walmart now, which I wish it was that easy to find stuff back when it started D&D. Absolutely. What is BECME? BECME is basically what you could consider to be, air quote, one of the first editions of D&D. So, even though we're currently on 5th edition, there is more than 5 editions of D&D. There's videos that do whole histories about this, and heck, maybe I should make my own video on the history of all the editions of D&D. But to put it bluntly, there was original D&D, and then there was basic D&D, there was a Moldvay, and there was a BECME, and then there was advanced, and then, there's a whole bunch of weird iterations of it. And then after TSR got moved off, then it became Wizards of the Coast, and then we got 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition, right? Pretty simple. Find a DM who gives out magic items like candy, take characters to the table, dominate the game for 45 minutes, die to Rock's Fall. Absolutely. I'm crying right now because I have to delete a character I played in the campaign, was canceled. The unfortunate truth of the matter is a lot of games don't see their end. A lot of games, sadly, do not see their epic finales. It's a sad reality that we gotta accept. Basic, expert, companion, master, immortal. So, the whole thing of, so for Mike, that is BECME, by the way. That is the translation of it. But essentially what it boils down to is original D&D was incredibly simple, but at the same time, the original D&D was also tied to a game system called Chainmail. I've actually got the brown books, not in person, sadly, but the original brown books for D&D, which are original D&D, those have a whole bunch of references to saying, hey, this feature works exactly how it works in Chainmail. So basically, they're making you buy Chainmail as well. And then eventually, and also wilderness exploration as well. But then eventually, once D&D became more solidified, and they went on to make the basic and expert and Moldvay and all the different versions, there was a little bit of confusion for some people because back then there was no internet, of course. But eventually, by the time 2nd edition AD&D came around, it was a lot more solidified. It was a lot more codified. Dave Arneson, yeah. So Gygax gets all the glory. Gygax gets a lot of the glory for creating D&D, but Arneson was right there neck and neck with him in the creation of D&D. Don't delete it. Have it show up as an NPC in your next campaign. Heck yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. Because I made a video today on Rock's Fall, and I think that went pretty decently. Just kind of a thing of oh, what's the history of Rock's Fall? So maybe I could make some shorts on some of the history of original D&D stuff. Maybe some people would appreciate that. Did you know back in my day, Elf was a class? Thaco for math enthusiasts who need Ego Scratcher. So, Thaco, for those of you that don't know, is 2-hit armor class 0. And ultimately what that boils down to is when you roll to hit, you add all of your bonuses, and then you subtract it against a combat matrix that you have, and basically you see what armor class you would hit. And what I will say in defense of THAC0 is that it was revolutionary for its time, and it made sense for its design in that being it was a derivative of a what do you call it thing, a war game, right? Because in war games, what you typically do is you roll to hit, and then you roll to wound, and then you roll to save, right? So so when you roll to hit, you say, okay, our ballistic skill is a 5, so we need to roll this number to hit. And then, okay, so to wound, this weapons, has a strength of 4, and then this has a toughness of 4, so we have to roll this number. And then, so on and so forth. So THAC0 made sense for the time. It was revolutionary. It was fantastic. But I'm here to tell you, even though THAC0 isn't complicated, having to reference a chart and having to call out to the DM, hey, DM, I hit armor class, whatever. Instead of having to call out I hit armor class, 3. Instead of having to call that out, you just say, hey, DM, I rolled a 15. And that just makes life a lot easier. How far have you guys ever deviated from a main storyline? A decent amount, I would say. A decent amount. The thing about main storylines is the players are the main storyline. So how can you really say that they're deviating from something when they're always doing it? Is what I would say. I thought THAC0 was a clown. Dude, it was so funny when Wild Beyond the Witchlight came out. There was a bunch of OSR YouTubers that were like so insulted at THAC0 the clown. Like, people are just straight up like, oh, Wizard of the Coast is attacking us. Wizard of the Coast is, like, hating us or whatever. But that was not the case at all. It was just a joke, and people took it a little too hard. Not saying that it was difficult math. It just wasn't necessary for every attack roll. Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what it boiled down to, right? Is having a combat matrix, is cool because the fighter has a different combat matrix to the cleric, and the cleric has a different combat matrix to the magic user, and like, that's cool, right? Like I think that's cool that each class shines differently. If you were basically to compare that to today, what that would translate to is the fighter gets a higher plus to hit than the wizard would, which I think is actually reasonable. But because of the numbers of how fine-tuned they are in 5e, it just wouldn't work. Because of how the numbers are structured and how armor class works overall, it just wouldn't work. But I still think that it is a genuinely good, thing of the fighter is better at fighting than other people. Because in 5e, that is not the case at all. The fighter is not any better at fighting than other people, which I don't think is good game design. For the player, it really just the same. The DM has to do the math. Roll the dice, DM says if you hit, but I understand the appeal of ascending armor class. Yeah, I mean, once again, just the simple call out of, hey, DM, I rolled a 15. Real quick. I roll a number, I rolled a 15, and I have a plus 3. Okay, 18. I rolled an 18. Simple as that. Oh, goodness gracious. And thank you, one and all. You all have helped me reach 10,300 subscribers, which is pretty baller. Thank you. 10,300 subscribers. That is a lot of subscribers. That's definitely more than I thought I would ever get, covering the content that I do. So thank you, thank you. What's the best death I've had at a table? Oh my gosh. If you weren't here for this earlier, Peter, but I ran the West Marches game where, I had 79 dead PCs. And now, that's just one campaign. I think overall my DM kill belt is well within the thousands at this point because, or maybe not in the thousands, probably below the thousands. But I've ran a lot of games and there's been a lot of dead PCs, so that's a really tough one. But the best death I've ever had at a table was a player character had to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, and they did so willingly, and it was like a truly climactic finish to a campaign. It was actually really baller. Like, they sacrificed themselves to save a bunch of people, and what was really funny is before then they made a contract with the devil. So, like, he immediately knew that, like, killing himself, that would mean that he'd have to go to hell. Like, that was really cool. Like, he killed himself, even though, like, he wasn't an he's not a good guy by any means, but, he sacrificed himself to save everybody and then got sent straight to hell. I'm getting ready to run Cyberpunk Red. Any advice to help introduce new people to that system? I'm actually going to make a video on this. But the best way to introduce anybody to any new game system ever is to not bog them down with mechanics. Never ever. Unless they are the super duper nerds that love that crunch, then yeah, go for it. But traditionally, most people aren't super duper nerds that want that heavy crunch, right? Most people just want to hop into a game and play the game. So that's what you do. You literally, you throw a character sheet in front of them. Yeah, and mind you, you throw a pre-built character sheet in front of them. You don't have them build a character for the first off. You give them this pre-built character, and whenever you ask them to do anything, or you ask them, hey, what are you doing? Have them respond to you in non-mechanics. Have them respond to you by saying, hey, we're playing Cyberpunk. Hey, I want to hack into the building. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, roll a dice. And you do all the heavy lifting for the mechanics. You as the DM, or I guess you're not a DM for Cyberpunk Red, but you are the referee, or I forgot the name of... Is it a referee for Cyberpunk Red? I totally forgot the name of the DM for that one. But you do the heavy lifting. You absolutely make sure that they only have to worry about explaining what they want to do thematically, and you convert it mechanically. Absolutely. The system will come over time. You never want to slap it in their face of like, okay, so you want to be a dual wielder? Okay, here's these dice, and you want to take this feature, and you want to take this enhancement, and you want to take this, sweet thing. No, do not bog them down with that. Just immediately get them saying, hey, like, what do you want to do? It's that simple. But sometimes you just forget because you, like, as a DM, you obviously want to, like, forget having to do the heavy lifting for a little bit. You want your players to know, but you need to have a burden. You have a burden to bear when you introduce someone to a new game, for sure. Especially if it is very much so different from the game that they know, which I'm just going to naturally assume, Dillionaire, that your players have played 5e, and sadly 5e does not translate over to Cyberpunk Red. It does not. Will say that I miss all the item customization from past editions. Maybe we'll see more of that with crafting system. I will cover that in my Fixing 1D&D One Problem at a Time series. Absolutely. My favorite death in Beckme, Game Elf decided to leap from second story of barn to try and kill Goblin Leader in a group of riding direwolves. Failed dex rolled critically. Faceplanted in the mud in the middle of the pack. It was torn apart. Oof. Oof. And mind you, what's really funny about some of the things that have carried over through all of the editions of D&D, falling damage of being a D6 for every 10 feet has stayed the same. But the implications are really different. If you take a D6 of damage in 5e, that's not that big of a deal. But if you take a D6 of damage in basic D&D, that is a tremendous deal. In fact, at level 1, that will kill you. So it's funny how the D6 of falling damage has remained the same for so long. Oh, goodness gracious. How long have I been going for? I've been going for 2 hours. Okay. I'm still good to go for a little bit. Still good to go. It was in my neck of the woods, it was 105 degrees today. So it was pretty hot. It was nice and toasty. And later on today, oh goodness. Later on today, I'm going to be grilling some burgers outside, and it'll still, even though I'll be doing it when the sun is like kind of setting, it'll still be like 80 degrees outside at the bare minimum. So it'll be nice and toasty outside grilling. So good. It'll be oh so good. $109 here. Woo-wee! Don't you love that summer heat? What's that in real degrees? Here, okay. What I'll say is, I think that'd be like 109 would be like 32, maybe somewhere around there. I'd have to ballpark it. I think it's like maybe 32 degrees Celsius. What I will contend to you is the metric system is better for measuring out distances, right? Working in tens and zeros is so much better than the BS system that we have of like feet and inches and miles and whatever else. Metric system, way better. Where I will not concede, however, is that Fahrenheit is, or what I will just absolutely die on a hill for, is that Fahrenheit is a better degree of measurement than Celsius. And the reason for that is because of basically the varying degrees. So like, the perfect example being, you can comfortably say, okay, today is going to be in the mid-70s, right? In the mid-70s can venture between 73 and like 76, let's say. When it comes to saying, hey, like what is it in Celsius? Like you can't really give out that vague estimation, right? Like you can't really do that often. Typically, you have to work a lot more, very, very solid of like, oh, it's going to be between 24 and 25 degrees Celsius today, kind of thing. We'll take a quick call and come back to awkward sounds. You in Southern California too? Absolutely. We don't need to measure boiling temperatures for weather. Oh, well. People complain about THACO and then use Fahrenheit. Once again, metric system way better than U.S. measurement system, but Fahrenheit way better than Celsius. Screw you. Fahrenheit's fantastic. Fahrenheit, it just allows you to work in real simple numbers of, like, hey, it's a weird cap, let's say, but like we typically know that, 0 is really bad, and then 100 is also really bad, right? So with Fahrenheit, it's really easy to be like, okay, as a human being, you want to be somewhere between the zeros and the 100s. At least we don't have a Kelvin, exactly, right? The only time you ever use Kelvin is when you're doing a science project, right? But when it comes to Celsius, you got to work between the numbers of 0 and I guess what's like the livable temperature, like maybe, I guess the high 30s, maybe 40. One of my rules of life: have a favorite everything and learn to defend it well. Like, Kelvin, what are you doing? Calorie counting? One of the biggest issues too when it comes to the whole, the measurement thing of, the U.S. trying to be different from everybody else is specifically when it comes to science, right? Because when it comes to the sciences of measurements and tools and degrees and, whatever else, like, it just creates a whole bunch of, like, issues that just don't need to be there. But on the other hand, too, is, if we take a look at D&D as a whole, D&D has only ever used the U.S. measurement system, because the U.S. measurement system, or no, the D&D measurement system started off with inches. For those of you that don't know, in original D&D, you didn't have a 30-foot movement speed. You had a inch movement speed. So, like, something can move 6 inches or 8 inches or 12 inches or whatever. And to that degree, I actually don't know how that was, like, done in other countries. I don't know how other countries, measured it. I actually got no clue. Should we switch to 1.5 meter squares on VTTs, 9m of movement per turn? That's another thing too. Is like 5e is obviously, Wizards of the Coast is an American company through and through. So, like, measurement is absolutely, tied to the U.S. measurement thing of, like, okay, you can, a square is 5 feet and you can move 30 feet, right? Like, that's incredibly simple. Like, if they wanted to use, the metric system, I'm willing to bet that they would have to change up the overall movements, Like, like, because I doubt they'd go to, like, it'd be weird to work in 0.5s. I don't think D&D would ever do that, right? I don't think you'd ever move like a 0.5. But I genuinely don't know. Best magic item in the game. Favorite, I heard some DM giving a player a rock of gravity detection. I gave a player a rock of gravity detection. Did D&D, I use Imperial, don't convert to metric, just makes sense. Yeah, D&D is made by American companies, so, you're going to use what they use, right? Standardized measurement in European, at least we're not measuring in hands. Exactly, right. Fun fact, Cyberpunk Red uses metric system for every square is 2 meters. Yeah, so I was about to say, the game systems I know that use the metric system, they work in even numbers. Like Cyberpunk Red uses 2 meters. That makes sense. Like, hey, I can move 10 meters in a round. That just screams simplicity. That screams just insanely simple nature. And I think ultimately most game companies want to make their game as simple as possible, right? At least, like, simple to a degree. Just Charlemagne's feet, apparently. Beckme had an interesting rule. Range was feet in dungeons, yards above ground. Yes. Yes. Because, as a friendly reminder, original D&D was basically a derivative of a war game. And in a war game, you would measure everything with inches. Because you're on a table, like, okay, my people can move 6 inches. That's super simple. It actually uses 1.5 meter in traditions, at least in Brazil. 5 feet equals 1.5. Yeah, absolutely. Haha, that is where I heard it. Forgot where I heard it. Thought it was brilliant. Rock of gravity detection is a fantastic magical item. It's always like, if you're the kind of DM that doesn't, like, immediately tell your players what a magic item is too, you just hand them a rock and you tell them that it's a magic item, and then they have to, like, either identify it or get it identified. Like, that's fun because they finally get told that it's a rock of gravity detection. That's just hilarious. I've never not gotten a a great laugh at the table whenever I've brought out a rock of gravity detection. Never not had a laugh. Woo-wee! It's funny, I'm somewhat building up my vocal strength doing this. Over the course of my whole life, I've talked a lot, but, typically I'm talking with another person and it allows me to stop talking. But when you are streaming, you typically don't have that privilege because, just as mentioned earlier, even stopping for a second could easily mean an awkward silence. Really unfortunate. I know the one I plan on springing on my Beckman campaign is an armband of saluting. Cursed item makes the player salute their opponent on their first turn. Oof. A wasted action, and specifically the first action in combat, would be terrifying. Is a compass not in the standard Explorer's kit? Probably not. I'm willing to bet that a compass would be extremely expensive in the D&D universe. Staying awake? Heck yeah, I am. When is my birthday? My birthday is in May, so unfortunately, not for quite a long time. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how, like, the compasses today, obviously, like, you can get one friggin' cheap, but I'm willing to bet in medieval settings, compasses are probably a bit more expensive. I'd have to look that up. Does it point anywhere but north? There's your gravity source. There's your gravity source, absolutely. Also, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to my YouTube channel, I've been putting out a series of community polls. And I've been asking about favorite biomes, and I also just recently asked about what your favorite mega dungeon would be. And ultimately, I am incredibly disappointed by the results. I will go ahead and... Is there a way to share this? Yes. Share post with your audience? What? How's it already shared? What? Is there not a copy button? Okay, I'll just copy the whole community post thing here. But I had already been writing on a Beast Castle mega dungeon, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't seem as interested in the Beast Castle mega dungeon as the other ones. It seems a lot of people are a lot more interested in the reverse mega dungeon, which I also have written a bunch for, and a lot of people seem to be interested in the plane hopping mega dungeon. Take that, cartographer's tool proficiency then. Best mega dungeon, Caves of Chaos, can't beat a classic. Caves of Chaos from classic Keep on the Border. It's a go-to. But I'm going to make my own mega dungeon. I'm working on 2 separate mega dungeons right now. I'm working on a mega dungeon that's basically Beauty and the Beast. And then I'm working on a mega dungeon where you get teleported to the bottom and the whole mega dungeon is you trying to crawl your way back up to the surface. Those are the 2 mega dungeons I'm currently working on. But it seems like a lot of people want a plane hopping mega dungeon. What is the longest boss fight y'all's ever completed? I want to say I had a 4-hour long boss fight. I want to say. Just due to the nature of 5e combat taking so long, it takes a long time, 5e combat takes a long time. What heard good things about Castle White Rock? Castle White Rock is good. Castle White Rock is good. It's definitely got that just classic vibe of, you start off at the top and you crawl your way down, and it's got some fun little areas here and there and everywhere. It's a Castle White Rock, I would say, is like just a really solid mega dungeon. Really solid. I voted Beast C. Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't think. I mean, I'm still gonna write it, even if I just write this mega dungeon for my damn self. I'm writing it because I want to run a mega dungeon in Beast Castle. But hopefully, when I go to sell it, people will buy it. Hopefully. What is your favorite world setting, or do you homebrew? I do combo both. I use world settings and I homebrew my own settings. It entirely depends on the individual campaign. Some campaigns, yeah, like it makes sense to have it be in Forgotten Realms, or for it to be in Planescape, or for it to be in X, Y, and Z. And then other times it I'll run it in my own world. Temple of Elemental Evil, Tomb of Horrors had some plane shifting, absolutely. Absolutely. But in regards of like a plane shifting mega dungeon, my idea would be each floor is just straight up like a new, like totally different biome. Like you're in like Hellfired one, and then all of a sudden you're in water the next. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of my idea process on a mega dungeon that I'll be potentially writing up. Hoo. Is it a coincidence that Prince of the Apocalypse is an unpopular adventure and Wave Elements is an unpopular monk subclass? I'm just wondering if the Four Elements is just not a draw as a concept. You know, that's actually interesting. What I will say is, no. What I am going to say is, I think that the problem with both of those has nothing to do with the elements. The problem with Prince of the Apocalypse is that it's a completely fractured adventure book that doesn't explain how the adventure goes, and yet the adventure at present isn't the best in the middle. And then the problem with the Way of the Elephant's Monk is that you are basically spending a ton of resources to do something that the wizard could have done 5 levels ago. Like, famously, the Way of the Element's Monk, you have to wait till 11th level, and then you can spend like 5 key points to cast Fireball. You know, if you, like, the wizard was already casting Fireball 6 levels ago, you know what I'm saying? Avatar Airbender copy that failed to deliver. Yeah, I think that they just completely underestimated, like, key points and, like, basically, like, the whole idea of multi-classing classes. You know, it's kind of weird. Speaking of mega dungeons, heard about one old school DM who didn't make Raise Dead available. One played, begged, and he agreed if party completed quest. Yeah, so I think it's perfectly fine to run a game where Resurrection's not on the table, right? Like, Tomb of Annihilation is a great example of that. I love Tomb of Annihilation because right from the get-go you say, hey, no more Resurrection, screw you. And I think it's perfectly healthy, right? I think it's perfectly healthy to say, hey, if someone dies, they die. Because I know that there are games, some people run some games out there, where there really isn't any threat. PCs don't die ever. And if PCs do die, then they immediately get brought back up like it's nothing. And me personally, whenever I'm playing, which is very rare, mind you, I don't play that often. But I know that when I go to play, I want to feel a threat, right? I find that there is no point to combat if there is no threat, right? If I know for a fact that this DM does not kill PCs under any circumstances, then why am I wasting my time with combat? I have played under DMs that never kill PCs. I have, been at those tables, and I find it to be boring after some point. You know, why, we're getting into a combat here. All right, what's this combat doing? Okay, we're not getting a MacGuffin out of this combat. We're not getting any story elements out of this combat. What are we doing here? So I think it's important that if you are running a game where PCs never die, that the combat needs to mean something. Otherwise, it truly means nothing. LOL, meat grinder. 3 TPKs later, party gave up and never asked for resurrection again. One of my first D&D adventure I bought and was recommended by the shop was 1E Temple of Elemental Evil. I read it and I hated how it felt. Room after room, just trap monster and puzzles, so little story. I never got around to play it. I will say, Temple of Elemental Evil... Hold on. Temple of Elemental Evil was definitely one of the early concepts of the Mega Dungeon, and sadly I just don't think it delivered. I think Temple of Elemental Evil is one of those examples of, hey, we're going to have a trap for a trap's sake. We're going to have wandering monsters for wandering monsters' sake. And ultimately, like, yeah, you could say, oh yeah, there's totally, like, the story of, this cult that is doing bad things. And then you do have some little story elements in the town, like, outside, because there's some adventurers that are building a tower, and there's, a church and all that. So you have some story elements, but ultimately, the game just boils down to, you go to one room, you fight 2d6 cultists, you go to the next room, you fight an Umber Hulk, you go to the next room, oh hey, the person gets hit by a trap. And it didn't feel inspiring. There are really great examples of mega dungeons that feel inspired. And I sadly just don't think Temple of Elemental Evil was one of them. Especially because, sadly, the grand finale is not entertaining. Temple of Elemental Evil, for all the buildup of all the slog you have to do to get to the very bottom, the payoff is not worth it. Sadly. I'm currently in a game where the DM considers the spell Healing Word OP and has banned it. Wants to add more danger to combats by making the healer run up to the down party member. OP is always subjective, right? OP is always subjective of, like, okay, like, what does it mean? What that's telling me is the DM wants a game where people go down, and when they go down, it's scary because it requires a little bit more effort. But there's a lot of other ways to address that, right? Like, you could address the whole whack-a-mole game system of 5e, where you just healing word someone, they come back up over and over and over and over again. You could ultimately say, hey, if you get knocked down and come back up, then you suffer 1 level of exhaustion, or even more scarier, 2 levels of exhaustion. That would ultimately just straight up remove the concept of, the healing word being OP, right? There's a whole bunch of other game mechanics you could implement to get rid of that. But, does healing word, being removed make the game ultimately more deadly? No. There's plenty of other spells that heal. There's plenty of the other game mechanics that heal. Healing word is just one of many. This is over 30 years ago, yeah. 2E, 3, 4E gave it a lot of story. Prince of the Apocalypse failed for me, but I like the Thars Dune edition. Zook the Moy. Yes. One thing I wish more DMs would do in 5e is make death saves secret. Yeah, so ultimately, that is actually a large game mechanic I'm actually going to discuss when I'm making my fix 1 D&D, 1 problem at a time series, is death saves. So, here's the little scenario here. Alright, fighter, it's your turn. You're fighting in the tavern. Half the tavern's on fire, and the chandelier is about to come crashing down, and the Umber Hulk's right in front of you. What do you do? And the fighter goes, "Oh, I'm gonna move back, and I'm gonna cut the rope, and I'm gonna make the chandelier fall on the Umber Hulk. Oh, that's awesome! All right, fighter, roll an attack. Oh, you succeed. Oh, that's awesome! All right, wizard, you're down. Roll a death save. Alrighty, next." Alrighty, Wizard, Rogue, it's your turn. What do you do? Ultimately, death saves prevent you from playing the game. Now, of course, we can take that a step further and saying dying removes you from the game too, right? So, where is the happy medium? How do we get people to continue to play the game, but at the same time make there be the presence or looming threat of death? How do we get people to play the game, right? Because death saves is not playing the game. And if you get knocked out for whatever reason, whether that be your own fault or you're just incredibly unlucky, it doesn't matter how you got knocked out, you're just not playing the game while you're just sitting there watching everyone else play the game. Once again, I'm going to be going into very, very large length and detail about death saves and how to fix it. There is a lot of things we can do with it. Ultimately, it comes down to the individual table of what you want. There's so many ways to approach it, and I will be covering it from a various number of angles about what do we do about death saves. What do we do about getting people to play the game? What do we do about not making people waste their time at the table watching everyone else play when they don't get to play? There's a lot of things to discuss there. Favorite song? Sadly, I just couldn't tell you. I never have a favorite song. I've moved from one song to the next. Players players like feeling like they have influence on the role, and you can't beat that Nat 20 pop-up. True, but but that only happens 5% of the time. More often than not, you don't, right? More often than not, you simply just sit there, you roll the dice once, and then you watch everyone else play the game. Secret death saves stop other players from saying, John passed 2 death saves, he's fine, I'm going to attack the dragon. True, but I'd rather not have I'd rather not have a game where that happens at all, right? So I'm okay with the saves being hidden, right? I'm perfectly okay with that because that makes people sweat a bit more. But at the same time, death saves are still a little bit wonky in my opinion. Curse of Strahd, I think, of one of the most controversial game they played. I heard people that love it and people that hate it. Feel like one of those love or hate adventures. Your opinion on it? What I'll say is Curse of Strahd is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most sandboxy adventures that they've written. When I say sandbox, I specifically am meaning that it's not written with a story in mind. Literally the only thing in mind is your players show up and they have to kill the big bad. How they go about doing that, entirely up to them. And the book further emphasizes that by not giving the DM specific instructions and details, right? The book doesn't say, hey DM, you should push your players this way and they should take this quest and whatever. No. The book simply says, hey, here is the adventure location. If they go here, cool. Me personally, I love that. I personally would rather have that than the more linear adventures that we've been given recently. Because I like being given a sandboxy area and making it my own. But that being said, I think that there's a lot of people who want the book to hold their hand. And Curse of Strahd does not hold your hand. And thus, I definitely understand why it gets a lot of trouble. And also, further to that, one of the biggest problems with Curse of Strahd is it is their most famous adventure. So a lot of new people show up to the hobby and get told, hey, Curse of Strahd's an awesome adventure. And guess what? New players pick that thing up and try to read it, and they can't read it. They're like, how am I supposed to run this? The book doesn't tell you how to run this. What's going on? And then that causes a lot of problems because people don't know how to freaking run the adventure because The book doesn't tell you how to run the adventure. So I like Curse of Strahd. Once again, I think Tomb of Annihilation is better because I love me some Tomb of Annihilation. But Curse of Strahd I think is great, but I think it's terrible first impression for new DMs. It's not Material Girl. It's about the hope of that 20 popping up. And also very importantly, if they roll a 1, they suffer 2 death saves. I'm not a big death save fan. In my old school campaign, allowing saving throws versus death every round. 1 failed, dead. If you are healed, you live, but you aren't popping up to getting back into the fight. That's a solid way of doing it. Left a lot of details out of Curse of Strahd, but it was really the first adventure mod with so much story that TSR published. Skimmed over details are a recurring trope of 5e adaptations. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, so, I mean, going back all the way from, the origins, I6 Ravenloft was absolutely one of the more compelling adventures that was ever made in that lineup, especially at that time, because having a villain that moved around, what? Having a villain that, has a motivation and a purpose in the adventure, what? Having an environment that, is dynamic, crazy, right? And, ooh, there we go, hide that user. But, I6 Ravenloft is absolutely a blast. And I actually recently ran I6 Ravenloft using old school essentials. So basically running it, using basic D&D. And it was a blast. It was a blast. I actually wanted to, in fact, I probably want to stream. You know what? Actually, this year for the Strahd Must Die Tonight, I'll actually stream my Strahd Must Die Tonight using old school essentials, using I6 Ravenloft. I think that could be a ton of fun. And for those of you that don't remember or don't know, in old school D&D, though big bad undeads, they touch you, you lose levels. Oh, yes. You lose levels. Vampire hits you, 2 levels drained. I believe it. Yeah. Vampires drain 2 levels. Whites drain 1 level. And also, funnily enough, Ghosts don't do any damage. Ghost is just straight up age you 10 to 4. Ghost either age you 10 to 40 years. I find some 5e campaigns very railroady and very to the point. I love the exploration pillar. I think Wizards of the Coast should do more to strengthen that pillar. Once again, I will absolutely be delving full on into depth and detail about exploration in my rendition of 1D&D. Because as of right now in 5e, exploration is non-existent. Exploration is there's literally maybe 2 pages to be found on it in total. So I will be making a much more in-depth analysis and design on exploration. That sounds fun and challenging. Ash, it is. So Ash, basically what it is I give you, a party of, you get PCs of however much XP. So you're probably going to be level 7, let's say. And then you get a bunch of retainers. And then you go off into the castle and try and kill Strahd. And naturally, because you got low hit points and, because people level drain you and this and that, it's a deadly affair and it's fun. Maybe they should have a difficulty level for the DM to run a specific adventure. Curse would get the highest difficulty. So, I personally would do that, right? But a company will never do that, because if a company did that, then basically what they would be saying is, hey, here's this product. It's really difficult. And guess what? People aren't going to buy it. Labeling something as, difficult is bad for business typically. Yeah, there are the fringe cases of, like, let's say Dark Souls. But for every Dark Souls that labels itself as being, crazy, strong, epic, hard, there is 1,000 other games that label themselves as hard and they get no sales. Told one of my 5e mates about the level drain. She said that those undead wouldn't have to have fear mechanic because she'd be shitting herself as a player and running like hell. Yeah, right? That's what I love about old school D&D is that, you as a, like, in old school D&D, their morale was a game mechanic, right? Monsters have morale, your retainers have a morale to some degree. But the thing is, players don't have morale. Because you don't need it. You as a player can recognize, oh, hey, we're in a bad situation, we need to run. Or, hey, this is a perfectly winnable situation, why would we run away? You don't need a game mechanic to dictate that for you. But 5e doesn't have any of that sort. 5e doesn't have anything that's too strenuous. 5e doesn't have anything that's too lingering. 5e doesn't have anything that's, out there. So there needs to be a fear mechanic because, when else would you fear anything? Sign me up, Ash. Absolutely. I will have, I'll be making things on that for sure. Yeah, old school monster abilities. One of my favorite boss fights to throw at my players is the Recoiling Spore Druid Nilbog. Self-damaging ability and stacking temp HP for non-healing damage. Like locks. Fear kind of work like that. Exactly, right? It's one of those things where it's so strange. Like, it's just there are thousands of fake hard locks. Absolutely. It's one of those things, the game design of, like, where are we now and where is it heading and what does it want to be? What does 5e want to be? What does 1D&D want to be? Like, does it want to be a pulpy action, high-octane game where you get into one fight and then you take a little nappy new? Does it want to be a game where you get into 6 to 8 encounters in a day? Because ultimately 5e was built up with the idea that you get into 6 to 8 encounters in a day. But guess what? Nobody runs it like that. Typically people don't run 5e as a game where it's death-defying every 5 seconds. People typically don't run the game a certain way. And that's why when I go to rewrite 1D&D, I'm going to write it in the way that it's currently being ran. Because I think that's more fair to the system. I'll go over my notes here for a second here, but first off, when it comes to classes are designed with the idea that you play levels 1 through 20. But very few people play levels 1 and 2. And very few people play levels 11 through 20. So we need to redesign the whole class structure because it's not working right. When it comes to weapons are incredibly boring because they do the same thing. So we need to fix that. When it comes to exploration, it's non-existent. So we need to fix that. And I'm going to be going hard on making that fixing 1D&D series because I want to make D&D the best it can be. And I think Wizards of the Coast isn't going to push it to where it needs to be. But I will. I'll do it. Love both 5e and old school, but the way I differentiate the two is telling players. In old school, think Pippin, not Aragorn. Exactly, right? Exactly. That's a pretty great way to look at that. Oh, goodness gracious. As a reminder, thank you one and all who've shown up. Thank you all for the lurkers and the commenters and the subs and the likers and everything and anything that you do, because y'all are really helping me out. You all pushed me now to 10,300 subs on YouTube, which is pretty freaking baller. Pretty freaking baller. You do sometimes find a group so good that they will judge themselves when they get scared from something, especially when they face something the DM make very scary. Yeah, and that's kind of the beauty of it is there are some things, specifically fear and horror, that some players just straight up cannot play in because they just don't get it, because they'd rather do something else. And, you know, like, for example, being Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is a game that you cannot run for every single player because some people just wouldn't buy into the horror. Some people just wouldn't buy into the scaredness. Some people just wouldn't do it. So sometimes it's good to have those game mechanics in there. But once again, it's also good to recognize what the players can and can't do and run a game for that. You are awesome. You're awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ash. You're all awesome. It's all about making the goals for the encounter about something other than kill or be killed. Yeah, I always recommend that, like, to build a dynamic encounter, you have that encounter where you're fighting the thugs, but there's also a cat in a tree, and you need to get the cat out of the tree because the tree's burning. And then also there's some goo coming out of the sewer, and you need to cover it up. So right there, you present a dynamic combat encounter of some people just want to fight, some people want to get the cat out of the tree, some people want to cover up the goo coming out of the sewer. Presenting dynamic encounters will go an absolutely long way to cementing a, you know, unique experience. And my first sub is still here. For those of you that don't know, Loriander is my very first subscriber. Very, very first one. And you always will be my first. Thank you. You always will be my first. Oh, goodness gracious sakes alive. What a world we live in. What a time. Any good reward to be your patron? So sadly for the past like month and change, I've been slacking on it. But if you are a Patreon to me, which I'll post a freaking link. Let me grab a link for it. But if you have been lazy and not looked, yeah. So if you subscribe to me on Patreon, you get maps, art, and magazines filled with goodies for your tabletop role-playing games. Like I said, sadly, I have been slacking on it, which is my bad. But I've been really busy with a whole bunch of other things and work and all the other stuff. So, so that is my bad, But I do plan on striking back hard. I believe this should work. Can you jump into VC? Absolutely. Abso-frickin-lutely. That's why I'm here. Must be a nice feeling of the first stranger to sub. Somebody I don't know wants to hear what I have to say on a regular basis. Well, Loriander is not my first. He's not a stranger. I knew him before. That being said, so funnily enough, I actually got incredibly lucky. I got incredibly lucky because I had a ton of friends, and I said, hey, like right at the start of my YouTube channel, hey, subscribe to me. So I got a ton of people to subscribe to me like within the first week. And I'm willing to bet that really helped the algorithm because that pushed my content out to more people. And I got a lot of subs relatively quickly.
Interesting.
How's it going, Farman?
You should tell more people to join your Patreon. I'm doing your job for you.
Yeah, I'm bad at selling myself for sure. Real bad at that. Need to do it more. I'm just always focused on other things.
I had something else I was going to say, but now I forgot.
Would absolutely sub on Patreon for the self-published perks, but you know we broke. It's all good. We're all broke, aren't we? Can't wait to get your opinion on my COC one-shot idea. Absolutely, I will get to that soon. Like I said, I've just been incredibly blitzed with some things, but you know, trying. I'm trying my best here.
My dog is licking the concrete.
Gross.
It's 102 degrees outside too.
Yeah, you don't want dogs lingering too long on the heat. Their pads will get all gnarled up.
Go inside. I don't really know what else I was going to say.
You take that sense from my subscribe from YouTube Premium though. Oh, that's dope. I didn't know that's how YouTube Premium works. I think like a quarter of like the money I get from YouTube is from like YouTube Premium, but I've never actually looked into like how that actually works. I'm wondering if there's an actual way to like find that out on YouTube. There must be, right? There has to be.
Okay, I will join VC again when I remember what I was going to say.
Alrighty. Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah, just looking over a bunch of things that I'm doing. I've got a whole bunch of little things that I'm writing up, and gotta get ready for more things in the future because I've got bunch of things to write up on. Oh, you know what? Tonight I've actually got a freaking I gotta watch me some Game of Thrones. Because if I don't watch Game of Thrones tonight, I'll be spoiled tomorrow. If any of y'all are Game of Thrones fans out there. And y'all know the struggle. Gotta watch Game of Thrones tonight, and then gotta watch some other things. Not entirely sure. Okay. Oh, goodness. But yeah, things are going pretty swimmingly over on the No Fun Allowed there train. Getting a bunch of subs, getting decent views, working on some content. I'll be trying to publish my written content up soon-ish. 2 episodes of Rings of Power just dropped. Yeah, I just watched those. They looked incredibly good. Like I genuinely was like, oh god, is this gonna be just straight up like you know, like a, not even like a Netflix special, but like a CW like superhero special where it's like janky $200 graphics. But no, the cinematography has been great so far. The real issue is like when you compare Rings of Power to Lord of the Rings, and specifically Lord of the Rings, we're not going to compare it to The Hobbit because we're not going to compare anything to The Hobbit. When you compare the Rings of Power to Lord of the Rings, the pacing of Lord of the Rings made sense because it's a movie. But the pacing of the show is just naturally going to have to be different. And like Rings of Power, I think is going to be like 9 episodes or something. That's straight up like a trilogy right there because each episode's an hour. So like the first 2 episodes, like I think are like solid, but like if the pace remains the same, it could get a little bit funky. We'll have to see. I just wanted the Big Bang episode with D&D in it. Content, dance monkey. Absolutely, gotta pump out content. Gotta make content. Gotta spit out all the content. Gotta keep grinding. Because YouTube doesn't care about you. It only cares about the content you make. Ultimately, which is sad. It's a sad reality. YouTube just straight up makes you pump out the content. Sometimes you don't want to do it, but you have to do it if you want to keep doing it. You know what I'm saying? Oh, goodness gracious. Like how they made hobbits the first ones that Gandalf encounters and Nori looks like Frodo. I didn't really think about her looking like Frodo, but, it kind of makes sense. Going back to the whole pacing thing, like I don't want to go into too heavy spoilers, but like, they introduced some either characters or concepts in like the first episode that didn't get touched up on the second episode, so we'll have to see how that like continues on throughout the remainder of the series. We know, we do appreciate your efforts. Thank you. Yeah, I'll like basically my plan is I'm gonna compile up a bunch of like written material. Like I've got a bunch of things that I've written up, and then I'm gonna release it like kind of in like close together chunks. So that way, if you like check out my material, you've got a little selection of material to buy of like, oh hey, he's got like a whole bunch like different adventuring things, and then he's got new subclasses and new game features and this and that. So I wanna like make like and most important of all, like just have like different adventures and stuff like that. I want to have a nice variety of a grab bag of things. So when you go to check out my content, it's not just like, oh, just one thing. That's it. Who cares? Like I want you to like at least look for like a couple of seconds to be like, oh, like this variety of content. Hopefully they make a film adapting The Hobbit someday. I heard in alternate universe there is one. Same universe the Highlander 2 existed. What's really funny too is I haven't watched them, but apparently the extended like versions of The Hobbit make the Hobbit movies better. Like apparently like the extended like the non-theatrical release is a better version of The Hobbit. I'll have to watch them someday. It's been years since I watched The Hobbit because, it's one of those movies where you only need to watch it once every few years. But I'll next time I watch them, I'll watch the extended editions and see how that goes. Oh, Highlander 2? They're from the future. What? Highlander 2. Highlander Boogaloo. I have not slept in 23 hours. You're about to make it 24, apparently. Honestly, I'm not gonna go to sleep, but I think this stream might go to sleep soon because Extended Lord of the Rings made those better too. Absolutely. I think that I will be. I'll be ending the stream and let's call it 5 minutes. I'll be ending the stream in 5 minutes because I've been going for a solid. Is it now 4 hours? No, it's only 3 hours, right? I started at. Yeah, I started at 2, so yeah, now it is 5. So yeah. So I've been going for a solid 3 hours, and I've answered a lot of people's questions and talked a lot and rambled a lot. So if you got any more burning questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, gripes, moans, complaints, if you have anything of the sort, feel free to ask, because I'm all ears for the next 5 minutes. And I'm essentially usually all ears anyway, right? For those of you that have like commented on my channel, it's more than likely that I've responded to your comment. You know what I'm saying? So I'm usually all ears. So for the next 5 minutes, hit me with anything you got, and then I can sign off. Content. Cool, we're boring you, it's fine. Listen, my throat, you know. How do I, never mind. You know, my throat, like, the thing to consider is, like, I DM regularly, so I've typically got a strong voice. But the problem is, when not the problem, when I DM, you know, the players are getting to talk. But, you know, with this, it's just me talking, because none of y'all have joined the voice chat. I think I know your answer, but as a Beckme fan, is OSE something I should invest in? Here's what I will say. OSE is without a shadow of a doubt the cleanest rendition of Basic that you can get. It is cleaner than any other version, hands down, no questions asked. You can get a free version of the rules, which I think runs up, like, for players up to, like, level 5 or something. So it's, like, more than enough. And, you know, it only has, like, the core classes or whatever. But the simplicity of the rules, the layout of the rules, and just the clean presentation is so fantastic. And I promise you, if you had to either show new players either Beckme or OSE, they're going to latch onto OSE a lot more. So check out OSE. It is well worth checking out. Because, you know, once again, there is also the free version too. What's the best damage spell? Fireball, because DMs never counter it. Needs his dinner. It's about that time. That too. I am gonna be making some burgers soon, so that'll be delightful. I'll be cooking them up on the grill, and I'll be adding some of my own little flavors and spices. Gonna be handmade patties, salt and pepper and garlic, and maybe I'll spice it up with little paprika, and I'll make my own special sauce. I'll grill up some onions. Oh, I'm already salivating just thinking about it. And he's the last one at the end of all of them until he's not. It's funny with my air quote passion for, can I come over? With my air quote passion for cooking, I feel like I could legit be, like, you know, working some, like, either food stand or something. I think I'd kind of enjoy that. When it comes to all of my job, or the kind, have a nice day, bye. Thank you, Dillionaire. Thank you. When it comes to, like, the kind of jobs that I'm after, I typically want, like, a people-facing job. Where I get to, like, interact with people, and so, like, you know, I totally like a food stand kind of thing where I'm sitting there cooking the food and, you know, talking with the people. I think that'd be kind of fun. Ultimately, though, I think probably one of the better jobs that I'd be better at would probably be a bartender. I have bartended in like not like in an official capacity, but like I have bartended, and that's always gone over well because I talk to people, I'm mixing up the drinks, I'm I'm babysitting people, I'm doing all that fun jazz. Is that a no? I don't have enough food. I've only got food for me. Sorry, I've only got food for me. So like yeah, I could see myself as a bartender, for sure. And in fact, actually, I was planning on making some videos on making D&D inspired drinks. And in fact, I've actually got the book right here. I was planning on making some some drinks from this, the Dungeon Meister, a Drink Master's Guide. And there's some really fun drinks in here. I'll see if I can spoiler any good ones here. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. Troll Slobber. Look at that. Making some good old troll slobber. This one's actually relatively easy to make. So I was planning on making some drinks like that. Alrighty. If you have nothing left to question. Here we go. Just cast Goodberry, my most hated 5e spell. Absolutely. Did you not get the memo? We broke. Alrighty. I think that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for lurking. Thank you all for liking and commenting and subscribing. Thank you to all my amazing patrons and I've got YouTube members now, so if you want to be a member on YouTube, you can do that there as well. And look forward to all the content that I'm producing. I'm going to be making videos on some the Adventure Guide series soon. I'm going to be making videos on making our own version of 1D&D, but it's going to be really, really better than the current D&D we have. I'm going to be making a whole bunch of, written materials for you to peruse. I'm going to be doing a bunch of things like that. So stay tuned. Join my Discord if you haven't already. Check out all that fun jazz. And I can't wait to see you all in the next one. See ya!